Meeting. I'd like to call to order the Middletown City Council meeting for Tuesday, November 16th, 2021. If we could start with a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Skank, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Vettori.
Here.
Ms. Nenny.
Here.
Mr. Moon.
Here.
Mr. Mulligan.
Here.
Mayor Condrey.
Here. Okay, this evening we have a presentation from Jeff Payne about the DMI security and an update on that. Mr. Payne, would you like to come up to the dais and speak with us? Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. We have a PowerPoint presentation, if I can get that.
But here we go.
Oh, great, thank you.
I guess so.
Okay, all right. First of all, I want to apologize. We were going to present to you earlier. Ran into some issues relative to getting information in a timely fashion. So we wanted to make sure that when coming before you, we can give you a very complete and thorough picture of how this program works, what the challenges are, so that you can make a decision as to whether or not you want to continue to move forward with it. And that's really part of what we hope to get from you this evening, is some idea as to whether or not you'd like to continue with the program. So, next slide, please. Just a little bit of background and history. And I guess before I start, I'd like to say that I started with DMI in September of 2017. And over the weekend, I was looking through some notes that I keep. I always walk around with a little notebook. And I noticed that the very first meeting that I had here in Middletown was a meeting with Chief Mutterspaw and at the Triple Moon. And the issue that we were discussing that day was tagging and other related loitering types of things. So apparently this has been obviously an issue of some sort for a number of years. So in April, when Chief Burke hosted a meeting and we were asked to attend, we came and there were a number of businesses that were at the meeting, and they were again citing that we were having these issues relating to loitering and things of that nature, panhandling and such. And of course, at that time, Chief Burke mentioned that the problem that we were looking at are really sort of symptoms of a larger problem, of course, as we know, but that we would try to look at some sort of solution to address at least those areas that we as a community could have some impact on. So in May, we had the DMI board developed a small procurement subcommittee to address this issue. We looked at 3 security consulting firms, and we recommended that Allied Universal Security be selected. And we presented that information to this body, and then on May the 18th, you guys approved ordinance number 0221-46, and that was for a grant in the amount of $49,724. Now, we actually contracted with Allied for a full year because of economy of scale. Basically, these firms, what they do is they like to put an individual on for a longer period of time. And so in order for us to get better pricing, we contracted, like I said, for the year, indicating to them that we would only have partial funding, and that at some point we would need to come back and speak to you all to see if you wanted to go forward. The other thing is that there is a 30-day notice of cancellation clause, and based upon the way the budget works out, that we would run out of funds at the end of December, and so we want to make sure that we have ample time to send them that notice. On average, this service cost approximately $7,400 per month. Okay. So in June, that was basically the start date, and we began to move forward. Next slide, please. Obviously, this is always an issue of concern. Our board wanted to make sure that our program had some fairly specific types of objectives. We knew that there were some concerns on a number of parties in terms of how we might move forward. So one of the things that we wanted to do is make sure that we were complementing and not competing with the Middletown PD. And of course, Chief Burke has been working with us all along. The other aspect of it is, this is just a personal thought, but when I meet someone who has certain challenges, whether they are mental, alcohol, homelessness, I say to myself, but for the grace of God, there go I. And so we want to make sure that we treat everyone with dignity and respect. That's so important. And then, of course, because we're coming out of COVID, and because we knew that there are a number of these challenges, we wanted to find a way to change the atmosphere downtown. And how do we do that? Because if people do not feel comfortable coming downtown, our businesses will not survive. I mean, it's just that simple. So we wanted to address the panhandling. We wanted to provide for those who might be willing to seek assistance, if they so chose, to be able to provide a referral to one city. In fact, I think it was the council meeting before our meeting that we were approved, that the manager approved you all approved a grant to one city, and that they would be available to provide referrals 24 hours, 7 days a week for mental health, as well as any other addiction type things. And then also we said, hey, here's an opportunity to begin to look at some other issues that exist. We have locations in our downtown that, quite honestly, are attractors for these kinds of behaviors. There's a lack of lighting, things like that. Those are all things that people find who are looking for some sort of shelter find as an opportunity to cover themselves, that kind of thing. So we wanted to look at ways that we could begin to address defensible space issues. Obviously, even looking into maybe certain things that we could help the city through code enforcement and things of that nature. And then, of course, as a Main Street program, we don't operate for any one individual. We work for the entire downtown. I mean, that's our purpose. If you go onto our website, we have probably close to 100 businesses listed. Not all of them are DMI business sponsors, but that in no way precludes our willingness to work with them, to help them, to get them engaged and be involved in any effort that we do. Next slide, please. So the elements of this security program, and I'll just kind of walk you through it. We worked with the chief, and we reduced and tried to focus in on what we call our patrol area. And I do have a slide that will show you that. and it's essentially the business Central Avenue between Water Street and University. Now, that's about a mile long. It's a nice little walk. I at least try to walk it about maybe once a week. I used to walk it a lot more, but it is quite a distance, and there's quite a difference in terms of businesses that are located along that corridor. We were able to contract for 2 8-hour shifts. Those shifts would have one officer on shift, and if you looked at the a normal day, 24 hours, you can do 3 shifts. So our first shift would start at 8 a.m. and go till 4, and then the second shift would go from 4 p.m. to midnight. However, that would only be for 5 days out of the week, and so we felt that Wednesday through Sunday seemed to be the most operable. On Mondays, pretty much Monday is kind of like Sunday in our downtown. Not all the businesses are open. There are some that are open, but for the most part, most of them are not. And then Tuesday seems to be kind of the getting started day for events. Of course, when we do ribbon cuttings and things like that, we tend to even push them to Tuesday, simply because there seems to be more of an availability for our businesses to participate. Our coverage began June 30th, and like I said, it's a 1-year contract with a 30-day notice of cancellation. The city grant funds, like I said, equal the 6 months. And this firm, I think, primarily was chosen because they have a Helios information system. Now, when they presented that, we were like, Helios, well, tell us what that's about. And essentially what it is, and I kind of hearken back to, I like old movies, and I just remember some of these old scary movies where you have the watchman going around, and he'd be walking through a building, and he'd stop somewhere and open up I guess it would be the checkpoint where you clock in to show that you made your rounds here and you made your rounds there. Well, this is more of a geo-based system. Any business could identify a need to the officers, and what the officers would do is then come and make sure that as part of their patrol that they made a stop at that location. For example, the PAC has had a concern about people coming into the building after hours and kind of roaming through and things like that. So the PAC reached out to our security firm, gave them their access code, and so like once a day at a certain hour, the security guard will actually go into the building and start at the basement, go all the way to the 2nd floor, and then come out. Basically just looking through to make sure someone, that no one who isn't supposed to be there is there, as an example. Or, for example, if someone needs, I'll give another business just wants us to patrol their parking lot, simply because they had some problems with break-ins. So the officer will, as part of their patrol, make sure that they go down and regularly touch base with that. Now, the thing about it is that as these requirements or this schedule is being developed, the Helios program actually has, I guess, these sort of markers that are in certain key places, and so they're able to track and make sure that the officer has, in fact, fulfilled that requirement. Now, we also purchased a bike. It's, what do they call it, pedal assist. And what that does is, because we did not want necessarily to have these officers in a car, and of course, we were told that the four-wheel drives weren't permitted, so we provided a bike for them, and then that way they could interact more so with the businesses. And of course, We kind of left this one issue open about a car because we just really weren't sure. I mean, like I said, we were moving fairly quickly, but when November rolled around, given the fact that the weather was is just too cold, we then went ahead and contracted for a vehicle. Next slide, please. This map is basically the patrol area, and I apologize, it's kind of hard to read, but the red line indicates the outer limits of the patrol area. To the far left is Water Street, and just some of the areas. It essentially follows over to Clinton. It's on the south side of Manchester, pretty much on the north side of First Avenue. We do pick up the parking lot at the library, and then we deliberately avoid the block where the gathering is located, simply because of the amount of activity that is going on there. We figured if we were trying to do that, they'd be there all day long, and so the chief said that the police department would basically patrol that. And then for the most part, the rest of it follows Central Avenue over to University. Next slide, please. This is kind of just to show you sort of the layout of the security teams, the hours that they're in operation. The sort of gold boxes, those are when we have coverage. So looking at Sunday on the far left, you see that basically on Monday and Tuesday we have no coverage, and then from midnight to 8 a.m. throughout the week there is no coverage, and that's about 56 hours, by the way, that we don't have that coverage. Next slide, please. I didn't present this slide for the purpose of you being able to read it. I just wanted you to get an example of what the Helios report looks like. On the left, that's basically what a Helios document looks like. It's pretty boring. It's their lingo that basically says you stop at this location, you do this, you do that, that kind of thing. Usually this is about 1 to 1.5, sometimes it's 2 pages long. And then, this was a new system that they're rolling out, we asked them to, when they had incidences, to really develop a description, a narrative description of what was going on with any incident. So, this is not necessarily every time they talk to someone. I spent a lot of time with the guys on patrol. And so, for example, if we're walking together and we go through, say, Governor Square, and someone's there and they see our officers heading that way, they'll get up and maybe move. Well, they're not going to write down an incident report for that. But if there's some interaction that needs special attention, maybe a call to the police, or someone, we had a situation where someone tripped and fell and twisted their ankle and we needed to call EMS. That's something that there would be a report on. Or if they had to go to one of the businesses and there was a need to call the police because of a trespassing issue, that's something that they would report. So even though these reports are fewer in number, the encounters are probably much greater in terms of magnitude. And in fact, I always found that the fewer the incident reports, the better things are. That's my opinion, Next slide, please. So what we did is we asked for sort of a baseline of these incidences. And so essentially this is the first baseline report of that. And it was prepared by Allied. We kind of went back and forth and said, hey, let's make sure we come up with some categories. And so the non-emergency, vagrancy / homeless encounters, and those are, again, incidences where there's been some level of interaction. It was 51%, and obviously emergency response is 33. Let's see, city maintenance issues. What that is we actually ask them to, anytime they encounter someone, and particularly like at night, and they're at a location where, say, the building's not lit, I told them, write this down, put this in there, because we want to use this to come back, share that with you all, so that you may be able to go out and assist in some level of enforcement or encouragement or what have you. And then, of course, other is 3%. Okay, so next slide, please. So then, as we got to the end, we wanted to do a quick survey of the businesses just to get a feel for how they feel our work or this work has come along. We sent out a quick email. Some businesses are in that email, some are not. I had intended to actually put a link on Facebook, which I didn't do, but we were kind of pressed for time. So if there's some businesses that were not included, I apologize to them for that. This was really a sampling. Went out to 133 email addresses, and 27 responses is kind of pretty good, generally, if you think about it. So here are the responses. The first one was we wanted to know if they felt that there was some problems prior to our starting this program, and basically 73% said, yeah, there were. So then the next question is, after the addition of our Allied, have you seen any change? And so 33% said no change, 15% said an increase in safety issues, 52% said fewer safety issues. So obviously something's happening. I'm not sure exactly how you read all that, but the fourth question is, do you feel safer after the addition of the Allied security? Basically, 67% said somewhat, much, or very much safer. So we think that there's a sense that there are some changes occurring. Obviously, they would be very slow, incremental. I don't think if something were to happen overnight, I would be aghast, I guess. That's the best way I could describe it. And then finally, do you feel Allied United Security has had a positive impact? And basically 74% of the respondents said somewhat or extremely positive. So we think that as a rule of thumb, based on that there is a sense of things somewhat improving. Now, the other item that we did leave was a comment page, and we asked businesses to weigh in with their comments. I didn't want to try to present all of those, but one of the things I did forward to the clerk was the raw comments, and I hope that you all were able to get them.
They're in your packets.
Okay, good. And what you'll see is there is a wide array of comments. Everything from, hey, it's great, to this isn't going to change the situation. Some even spoke to particular incidences that they had encountered. So that's kind of where things are from the standpoint of opinions. Next slide, please. So here's where I guess I have to really talk about some of the challenges that this program faces. And, again, like I said, and the chief mentioned when we first started this, a lot of these things are beyond even the city. Personally, I think it's probably a county issue, if not a regional issue. And so what we're really trying to do is impact those things that are affecting us locally. But these are some other issues. I brought them up, and I'm just going to be as transparent as I possibly can. First of all is guidance on rules of engagement. And when I say that, you know, one of the things that our board was very concerned about is one of our officers speaking to someone or asking them to move along. I mean, one of the big challenges is that most of the issues occur in the public space. When you go to the mall, the minute you drive onto the lot at a mall, you are on private space. And if you, as my grandmother used to say, come in there and start showing out, they will hold you and have you arrested if they need to. Here, we don't have that situation. Most of our concerns are in places like Governor Square or just on the street or what have you. So how do we, what is the rule of thumb for when you can speak or ask someone to move along? And so we need that kind of guidance. I don't know if the city has a loitering ordinance or anything like that, but those are some of the things that are helpful in helping these guys do their job. And I might point out that they, just like our police department and guys and ladies that work for the police force, they have families and they want to go home safe and sound at the end of their shift. And so sometimes they will have encounters that are not very, very pleasant. We also want to talk about better communication with the police department. Like I said, they use the Helios system. The Helios system it's basically a cell phone. And so when they come upon a situation that they think may be somewhat hazardous for them personally, the only way that they have to reach out for assistance, because they do not carry a billy club, they don't carry tasers, they do not carry pepper spray or anything like that, they're just walking up, is they have to go to their Helios phone and dial 911. So one of the things that they had suggested and asked for was possibly a radio or something that could be assigned to that unit. And so when they're in a situation where they feel like things are a little shaky, not so cool, they could at least provide some insight to the police department. I'm coming upon this situation, what have you. In fact, one of the officers, he's is no longer working with our downtown group, but he had experience working in Cincinnati because Cincinnati had a program somewhat similar, and they were assigned radios, and they had two channels. One channel went directly to police, the other went to EMS. So that was a thought. The other area is a need to coordinate and collaborate with our local social service providers. I can't express to you the challenge that is. I mean, we have entities downtown that are really trying to, they have a mission to help those, but we need to communicate with them to explain that maybe their approach to providing their service needs to be slightly altered. Sometimes things are being offered that folks don't need. So if they don't need it, but you make it a requirement to accept it, then what it really ends up becoming is trash. And not always is that trash placed in a trash can. And then finally, we just feel that, you know, if we have an opportunity, if you choose to move forward, it would be a good opportunity for the businesses and building owners to come together and kind of talk about ways to work on improving their building or establishing certain standards for whom we, for how we as a business or as businesses address people. Next slide, please. So there's kind of two moving forward questions. My first moving forward is, does the city want to continue this program beyond December 31st, 2021? If so, what's the format? You want additional days? You want additional hours? I would say that if, for example, you were looking to go forward just with the same format, it's probably going to be in the same dollar amount, with the exception that we do have now a car, and that car is not free, it's not included, and so we're looking at least an additional $1,000 per month for the use of that car. And of course, the weather gets warm probably around, say, March, so you'd be thinking January, February, and maybe March, and then we go back to bicycles in April. So if you want to do that, we do need additional funding for the next 6 months, if that's what you would like. The next slide, please. The other thing is, and I just wanted to speak to this because we're excited about Holiday Hoopla. Although I kind of got myself in a little bit of, I won't say hot water, but what we wanted to do as Holiday Hoopla was coming online and they were out doing a lot of construction, there was a concern about having, $200,000 worth of lights laying out in different areas, and somebody might want to share, borrow, take home, put in their backyard, or maybe even damage. So we actually shifted our 8 o'clock crew, our 8 o'clock guy, to be there from midnight to 8 o'clock. But we have an obligation to the balance of the businesses downtown to move that guy back to the regular shift. So we've talked a little bit about a way to do that. That would be basically about 56 hours over 7 days, and just during the period of Holiday Hoopla, we estimated that'd be somewhere in the neighborhood of about $10,000 to $11,000, if that was something that you wanted to do. And so city council action is pretty straightforward: yes or no for the additional months, or specify additional days or hours. And I don't want to sound pestery, but we do need a response within the next 7 days. We're coming on the Thanksgiving holiday, and I want to make sure that however we need to transmit a decision, that we make sure it gets there on time, so we're not stuck with an additional month of cost. I'm available to answer any questions if you have any.
Mr. Payne, thank you for the update. Is DMI leasing the vehicle?
We're leasing it, it's part of the contract.
But it's in DMI's the entity that is?
Yes, as part of the contract, yes, sir.
Kind of when we started down this past 6 months ago, my thought was really more this was a bridge instead of a permanent line item every year. I know there had been some conversations about a SID or about downtown, a different approach to this. Has DMI had any focus on that, or where are they at currently? Because, I'm not looking to make this a permanent program. It was, again, a bridge to help out during a hard time until we got to a SID or something else.
Well, I think that's probably something that the manager would be more able to respond to. We were asked to assist, and so we have tried to do that to the best of our ability. If, for example, some communities, because we did reach out to other Main Street communities, and for example, there's a Main Street community in Cleveland they have a similar program, but it's funded like through a SID. They have the funds to hire, and that's what the SID produces, obviously, additional off-duty police officers who will do the patrol work. And then if there is an encounter or they see someone who's in need of some assistance, they have that same sort of outreach capability for alcohol, drug addiction, or mental health issues. So, but clearly that would be something that would be in the purview of the city manager.
Jeff, I know that you're also sort of involved with the holiday hoopla and all of that. This $10,000 to $11,000 for security coverage for that event. Do you know if that is included in the gap financing that was already asked of us from them?
I'll just be, I'm going to be honest, I'm a little confused on all of that. Okay. We urgently want to make sure that our holiday hoopla event comes off. I am like so excited about this event. I'm just going to tell you a little story. My first year also, I don't want to mention it, Philip Harrison was our board chair. And for the Christmas holiday, he and I went out with a ladder and we hung Christmas lights and garland in Governor Square. And I asked myself, why am I, or, you know, hanging lights in a public park? That should be the responsibility of the local community. I mean, other communities do that. So, and I'm not trying to be critical. I'm just saying that I just thought it was so unusual. So with holiday hoopla coming up and all of this being developed, I mean, I think it's just going to be an absolute game changer for downtown. If nothing else, people will come through downtown because of the rubberneck effect. They'll see lights and go, what's that down there? And then all of a sudden they drive through and the next thing you know, oh, you got an ice skating rink too? Well, you know how that is. Mommy, daddy, let's go ice skate. And so there'll be a lot of impulsive kinds of attractions happening just because people, by coincidence, went by and saw what was going on. So we wanted to just help that effort because we think it's good for downtown.
Jeff, how well did the, or has Allied Securities, I think it's called, how well did they work with you? I mean, how much was asked of you during all this, or was it pretty much hands-off? They ran things pretty well?
Well, they are trained to do what they do. They stay in communication with us quite a bit. You know, one of the things that we did when they first started, I walked around with both of the security guards and their supervisors, and we tried to, over 2 days, go to literally every business that was open in downtown. And so we wanted to make sure that they had this initial face-to-face meeting. Here's Tyler and, you know, Orlando. These are the guys that will be coming around. And we told every business, if you have a specific need, let us know, let them know. They'll plug it into their Helios system because that's what they're here for. They're here to assist businesses in creating that atmosphere of greater safety.
Jeff, how many, I don't know if this was addressed in here, how many calls for service did you get from local businesses for these guys to come help them with a specific problem?
I can't give you that number. You know, one of the things that, for example, if I received a call and they'd say, hey, Jeff, we'd like for them to do this for us. I'd say, well, when you see the guy, just tell him.
But we're not tracking that?
Not that specific list, but what I can do is get with them and ask them for that particular list.
I'm just curious how much the businesses are actually engaging with them and letting them know what their problems are. You know,
my sense is that for those who want to utilize the service, it appears to be at least a reasonable number, they are, and it's all in different ways. Like I said, one of the businesses, all they wanted them to do was check their parking lot. You don't have to come in, just go by and check their parking lot at this time of day, because that's when they felt they had a need, as an example.
And then Jeff, sort of on that same note, how many times was someone referred to one city, and do we have any information about how effective that partnership was in the, in the time that they were working?
Well, I don't have those specific numbers, but if you want, I can look to get that information as well.
Yeah, I just would be curious to understand more about how that relationship
Yeah.
has developed, if it's successful, if that is something that's effective.
Well, and let me just say, because I know that I've had a couple of instances where that experience has been shared with me by the guards. The one city experience is this: if a person is ready or feels that they want to go into some form of rehab, you got to do it then. Because if you're coming back an hour later or 6 hours later, that feeling, that willingness may have been gone. So it's kind of an immediate type of need. I've not heard any complaints from the guards saying, hey, we called them, they didn't come out. So I presume that has been working relatively well.
Do you have the cost per month for the 6-month contract and the cost per month for the 1-year contract?
Well, on average, like I said, it's been $7,400. Now,
But you said that you saved money by signing a 1-year contract.
yeah, we saved money by signing the 1-year contract, yes.
So what was the cost for the 6-month contract per month and the cost for the 1 year?
We said, let's negotiate for the 1 year, because we knew that, all the firms that worked with us told us that if you go with with a 6-month, they're going to charge you a much higher rate. So we didn't even ask for that. We knew that having a 30-day clause without any cost to us to close out the contract, we would take that approach. We wanted to be prudent.
Okay. Do you know what happens to the bike at the end of the contract?
It belongs to DMI.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they had proposed that we could purchase a bike through the contract, and we decided that it would be better if DMI purchased the bike. We worked with Spoken to order the bike. They were going to get us some regular bike, and so this pedal assist bike is a much nicer one. It's been much better for them.
And I was also going to ask how many referrals to one city. So if that is a stat that you could get for us, that'd be great. I'd be curious on that. Do you know, how did you choose who to send the questionnaire to?
I basically took my email list, which I will admit needs some updating, and sent that out to everybody on the email list. And I'm probably aware of one of the businesses that was not included. I've been watching the Facebook postings, and so.
Do you know, like, if on that email list, the respondents, were they spread out along Central? Were they all located in, was it one per business?
My email list to the businesses has 133 names. And so that goes to everybody, and I don't do some kind of geocoding as to where they are.
Okay.
And I'll just say, historically, when we've sent out Survey Monkeys to the businesses, we typically will get very small numbers of survey responses. That's just the way it is. I got a call today from somebody who wanted to survey us, and they actually had to call to make sure. But normally, I'm not sure how many people are into doing surveys. I'm not a big survey guy. I see a survey, I'm like, I ain't got time for this, because because I'm busy, you know, that kind of thing. So,
So I'm just looking at some of the numbers, and I know like that chart that said there were 39 incidents is what the chart had, which doing the math means we're paying $1,282.06 per incident. Just doing a little math on that, it's not the greatest numbers. I think everybody knows I didn't support this to begin with, and I feel if downtown businesses want it and want to create a SID for something like this, I think it's a great idea. I just, I'm with Mr. Moon. This was not something that, well, I didn't like to begin with, but now I don't believe it should be a permanent thing, and especially considering, the part that rubs me really wrong is that DMI is charging the city $5,600 for administrative fees associated with this. I mean, you're paying out $44,400 for the contract and charging the city $5,600 for your time and effort, and that man, I don't like that. It doesn't sit well with me even to begin with.
well, first of all, let me just respond to your first comment, Your Honor. Let me find that little email, whatever, see if I can find it. I think that response, or what you received, is an oversimplification of the numbers. That's the first thing. What that business person was responding to were the incidences that were recorded between June and September. So we don't even know what the numbers are from September to today. So that's the first thing. And then secondly, as I mentioned earlier, just because you have an encounter and that encounter does not result in a need for you to, say, call the police, call emergency, take on some action, that doesn't mean that couldn't be factored into it.
Sure, and I'm just trying to use the metrics given to make some semblance of it. I'm not saying it's.
You're perfectly all right with doing that. But I just want to make sure that sometimes people will try to oversimplify what is probably a little bit more complicated issue. We are, as the board, is willing to accept whatever direction you provide.
I was curious, I didn't see Chief in the audience, but I was a little bit curious if he had anything to add to this, in working with the security firm, what kind of response he would have. So I'd be curious to hear from him as well, just about how things are going.
Yeah, unfortunately, Chief Burke, as well as I think Deputy Chief Crank, are both out of town today at a conference. So unfortunately, they would have been here and would have been more than happy to make that response.
If we could get a response from him via email, maybe, just to give us a little bit of,
Is there any input to date from the chief of police on the renewal of this contract? Is there any input from him?
There certainly could be, but unfortunately, as indicated, he's not here, and I don't want to speak on his behalf.
I'm not sure how this plays out from here. It's not a legislation item, I don't think, or on the agenda, but you're asking us for within 7 days to give you an answer, but that's not really how council works. So do we have it would have been nice to have you earlier when you I mean,
You're right. I think it'd be difficult to get anything that fast. I think DMI is probably going to have to work under the assumption that there is not additional funding.
That's fine.
Until and unless council decides to do otherwise. You could try to do some sort of a motion tonight if you wanted to, but it sounds like there's additional information that council would like before making any kind of a decision like that.
I would just have a question. Mr. Powling, do you have any ideas on a funding stream for something like this, whether it's downtown security or maintenance or beautification? I mean, I know we had talked about a new community authority for different purposes, but would something like that, sales tax on downtown businesses that would be paid by patrons to support something like this, is that something that staff would be willing to investigate?
Yeah, Councilman Mulligan, I think what is typically done would be what has been mentioned, which is the SID, or the Special Improvement District, so that, it becomes a voluntary willingness to impose some increment of new, tax in order to then have a recurring revenue stream. A new community authority is almost always used to at least get started for some type of economic development project. So if we had an economic development project, I think you could get it started, because again, it's a voluntary thing, and then it might be able to be expanded that way. It would be kind of hard to start it on its own because of the nature of the legislation, the way it's a voluntary. It might be able to be sort of started for something else and then expanded. But typically, you would see this as a special improvement district, usually.
And I think some staff work might have been done on a SID just in the past 3 years.
I've talked about it for years, and just to clarify my earlier comments, I have made no decision on your request, because we just heard about it 2 or 3 days ago. I'm just saying, if we're sitting here in a year or 2 years or 3 years, that at some point there has to be an off-ramp. It just can't be an every year type of thing. But yes, we've talked about a SID for a long time.
Well, one of the things I would note too is obviously the special improvement district tends to be probably more likely or more successful if you have a more vibrant, district where more of the buildings are actually filled with businesses. Then the business owner is more likely to want to participate, pay for it, and get those services. But right now, as you know, many of those buildings are simply owned by individuals, and they're not producing any income. So I could see where many of those individuals would not be supportive of the SID. So it's kind of difficult, to sort of, it's the chicken or the egg. When do you get the one started as opposed to the other? So I think the SID is the answer, but it's not something we should try to impose on that business district, because they have to be ready and prepared to be willing to sort of tax themselves, because that's what it becomes. It's sort of a self-imposed tax.
So who leads that conversation if it's not the city?
It's really a DMI. I mean, it's a group like that has to say, we want to take that next step. We would like to create that.
I feel like that conversation has happened loosely, and people have done some like back of the envelope math, because it's based on linear feet and store frontage. And to Mr. Palahniuk's point, when you look at how many are unoccupied with owners that don't respond and things like that, the math just doesn't really add up, is what I remember in a conversation years ago. So if there's only a couple of buildings that are actually open, that linear square footage doesn't amount to much.
I remember there was some research done by DMI,
Yes.
and that, that was probably at least 3-4 years ago, maybe even before you were.
Well, as I was arriving, the Economic Restructuring Committee was working on an approach. It was probably a very more basic approach. We have had an opportunity through various work with Heritage Ohio to see some other approaches to developing a SID. And so, and we've done some research, just very light research. I know when the city manager first arrived, we shared with him some information from a consultant that has been doing some work in a number of the Main Street communities that we thought might be worth listening to hear how that approach works. It's basically kind of a 3-step process, and they do step 1, and you kind of figure out, okay, this makes sense. Do we want to go to step 2, and so on and so forth? Because a lot of times when communities are looking at going with a SID, sort of the traditional thing is, well, we're going to pay all this out, and then we may not get to a point where we can do it. So that was one approach, and of course, at the time, COVID had just sort of hit, and so everything was kind of like, on hold. But if that's something, and manager, if you'd like, we could at least share that with city manager, and he, for information for you guys.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all for your time.
Okay, we have citizen comments this evening. Thank you guys for your patience. Looks like we have a total of 5. We'll start with Mr. Marty Kohler, followed by Amy Chupka. And just as a reminder, everyone has 3 minutes, and please state your name and address for the record when you get up.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Marty Kohler, 508 South Main Street. I come to you tonight representing the South Main Neighborhood Association. That group's been around for over 40 years in Middletown, and we have done neighborhood improvement projects in the South Main District, including improvements to Old South Park. We operate the fountain. We do neighborhood cleanups. We sponsor the street lights and all sorts of things on in the neighborhood. And we meet on a monthly basis. We'd like to thank the Economic Development Director and City Manager who came to our meeting in October and informed us a lot more about the Riverfront Development Project, and we do appreciate that. We met again last week for our monthly meeting, and of course one topic of conversation was the riverfront development. And we had unanimous consensus that we want to see something transformational happen on the riverfront. We're excited about that. We're getting a little tired that the first thing you see crossing into Middletown is a burned out factory and a sewage treatment plant, and it's not the greatest first impression. We also recognize the potential of the riverfront. We see communities all up and down the Great Miami River who have done wonderful things with their riverfront that their communities are proud of. Their community gathering areas, there are things that they can celebrate. We look at Miamisburg, Dayton, Troy, Piqua, the whole length of the river, and people are rediscovering that. And with our river center that was recently built and the AK Pavilion, we have some assets to build on. The key is we are very supportive of something that is reflective of the character of Middletown and reflective of the scale of downtown. And so the membership wanted me to convey that to City Council with your appreciation of everything that you do for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Amy Chipka, followed by Betsy Hanavan.
Hi, Amy Chupka, 201 Middletown, or Alamo Road. I'm here tonight because I have spent many hours sifting through emails, proposals, and contracts, and I continue to struggle with Hollywood Land, our city manager, and his comments about Middletown residents. It appears that Mr. Palahniuk, whether stating it to the press or in emails to council, views the people of Middletown as lacking the ability to fully comprehend this project. Mr. Palahniuk, I know doctors, lawyers, professors, business owners, along with many others in this town that are very intelligent and able to read documents, understanding the full context in which they are given. If you truly feel that the residents of Middletown are too small-minded to grasp the concept of this development, why are you here? And why are you trying to bring Hollywood here? Because in your mind, we clearly are undeserving of this venture. Maybe you should take Mr. Raichi up on his threat to move Hollywood Land to the Columbus area. But honestly, I believe dumb is maybe what you were looking for, that we were too dumb to dig into the details of this proposed project or ask for legitimate questions. If that's the case, I'm not sorry for disappointing you. I'm not sorry. The people of this town are smarter than you give us credit for, and we care about this town more than you assumed. So now we are all paying attention. I would love for you to stand up here and explain why you have been lying to all of us about the city not having to pay for any of this project. According to the emails between you and Mr. Ratchie, the city has to obtain $230 million in bonds to cover the expense of the convention center and parking. But you have said repeatedly that the citizens do not have to pay for anything. Yes, I understand you and the developer have agreed that the project revenues will pay for the bonds, but that's not actually in the contract. So again, what happens if the project revenues don't cover the bond expense? You want to commit this city to $230 million, and yet you try to tell us that we don't have to pay anything. It's like a stranger coming up to you and saying, hey, I'm going to buy the house down the street. Can you go and get that loan for me? Don't worry, I have a job, so I can pay for the loan. You give them permission, knowing that nothing could possibly happen to their job? Or do you say no because you would have to cover the expense if it went unpaid? So unless the city has money hidden somewhere to cover these bonds, the city taxpayers would most certainly be the ones footing the bill. In addition to that, I find it very interesting that you weren't even aware of how large that $230 million number was until only a few days before the project's release to the public, 2 days to be exact. with all the supposed due diligence that was done, how were you not aware how high this number was? You yourself seem surprised in your emails knowing that you would have to, quote, answer for that. Well, why would you have to answer for that if the city's not responsible for it? Because we are. Mr. Palahniuk, you won't be here in 5 years, but we will, and we are the ones that will have to manage the fallout of a botched deal like this. So ultimately, I ask council to vote down the ARPA budget that is presented tonight and find a better use of our $7.5 million so we can stop wasting time, energy, and resources on this project. Then next month, vote down Hollywoodland completely so we can start focusing on real development opportunities for Middletown.
Thank you. Next, I have Betsy Hanavan, followed by Ted Miller.
Good evening, Betsy Hanavan, 800 South Main Street. Faith, trust, and transparency. That's what every citizen almost in the city of Middletown has lost in our city leadership and our city council. And if this city is ever going to move forward, it has to be restored. I'm on the Incentive Review Committee, and during a meeting in June of 2020, I questioned how long we allow an agreement to go on when the said terms of the agreement are not being met. The issue of COVID was brought up, so I pointed out that the data we were reviewing was through December 2019. That's before COVID even began. In some cases, COVID is completely irrelevant, so I wish it would stop being used as an excuse. To be clear, had I been able to attend the meeting this year where changing the terms of CRA agreements was discussed, I would have strongly opposed and voted no. I do realize some of the timelines of the agreement may have been affected by COVID. However, help was accessible in the form of federal grants available to small businesses, as well as an additional $50,000 approved by the city of Middletown on May 18th through the Growth Expansion Fund. If we simply renegotiate contracts without any hesitation to benefit parties who fail to meet the agreed upon terms, what credence will be given to any contract moving forward? Contracts should consist of two legitimate sides, value given for value received. The power of a contract or agreement lies in the fact that each side is legally obligated to perform. If nothing is asked or expected for one party, and only one side is going to benefit, in essence, that's a gift. And CRAs are not meant to be gifts of taxpayer money, and the city should not be in practice of giving such gifts. If council agrees to change the terms of the CRAs this evening, especially approving to continue any CRAs for which the city will receive nothing in return, please be prepared to revisit every agreement, every contract, every time the terms are not met. Additionally, since it was stated during the last council meeting that the goal is to be fair and equitable, understand that your decision this evening will set a precedence. Property owners can easily create an LLC. Other business owners may come forward. Is the city really prepared to offer the same deal to everyone and anyone who requests it? Be sure the decision you make tonight is one that is in the best interest of the city and, most importantly, all the citizens. Otherwise, you will only continue to perpetuate the lack of faith and distrust that the citizens already have in our city leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Ted Miller, followed by Jim Stiver.
Ted Miller, 4209 Fisher Avenue, Mayor and current and future members of council. It sounds like Hollywoodland is dead in the downtown area, but Mr. Palahniuk noted a Plan B area near the interstate. I believe that DLR and Producers Group and Gilbane could architect and build a beautiful venue. If you decide to go ahead near the interstate, the question remains on whether the venue can book concert shows and filmmakers. Bob Chambers told us that there will be 17 Hollywoodland sites across the U.S., reaching 80% of the U.S. population. He didn't talk about it, but for that to work, you have to have an overall management group booking national acts for the concert stages. So an artist could just book with one group and have a U.S. tour set up, or similar for a Broadway show or an art exhibit. There's negotiating power in the group of 17. With that power, we would be able to be in a better position than some other local venues to book concerts and shows. This group could make Hollywoodland operate successfully. I say could. You should see this group called out in the contract, but I don't know if it's there. If we are the only site or the second site shows up 5 years after us, we won't have the synergies of this group of 17 going in. And the Middletown venue will fail before the others come online. So we should not be the first or the only site. So I would say if you're going to go ahead, you need to change the contract to make it more feasible during the initial operation. Set aside the $7.5 million in an escrow account, delay our work on the project until after Mr. Raichi can show proof that there's at least 9 other sites coming online and that there's this overall group to manage it. We'd give him 3 years, less than 3 years to prove that he's got 9 sites in the management group. If he doesn't have it by 3 years from now, the contract gets broken and we pull the $7.5 million back to use other places around town. I chose 9 sites as an example because it's more than half the sites. The 3-year time limit still gives us time to recommit the money before the ARPA deadline of December 31st, 2024. So you still have a decision to make. I doubt that Mr. Ricci can pull off the other sites, but if he could, we might hit a home run. Thank you.
Thank you. Next I have Jim Stiver, and that's the last one.
Thank you for giving me some time to speak, and I'd like to thank you all for your time and effort working on City Council. I know it's a tough job. I'm going to make some comments here, and I will make a statement, and the comments will be, I think, pragmatic and kind of personal here.
Can you state your address?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Jim Stiver. I live at 2803 Fleming Road. I'm a Middletonian from start to finish.
Thank you.
And at the previous meeting I attended, the police and fire chiefs both mentioned that they were short-staffed. This is one problem I see with the potential Hollywoodland deal. The guys that are the police and firemen, they need to educate the community. That's part of their job, fire safety, traffic safety. So I have a problem with that. The infrastructure is in pretty bad shape. The streets, water lines, and sewer lines both need attention. This is going to be a problem if we do have a Hollywood-type thing coming here because it cannot handle it. Now, this is my personal thing. I worked for the city as a college student for 5 summers, so I got to know the city quite well. I was on street department for 4 years, so I saw the city in its salad days. I saw how it ran. And in 1970, I spent the summer with the city water department. Now, in both departments, I heard rumors of 19th century technology still in Middletown, wood water mains. It's 2016 or 17, I can't remember which. I'm with the Broad Street Bash. I do the concerts. And we needed a reducer for a fire hydrant to operate the misting tent. So I went to the water department and talked to them, and they were going to install it. And I talked to one of the city water workers, and he got all excited. I was a former worker. And he showed me a piece of oak hollowed out in the middle, which was a water line just taken out of the streets of Middletown, old downtown. So we do have an infrastructure problem from the 19th century, and this is now the 21st century. Now, here's my little comment here. Famous golfer Jack Burke said, you got to do first things first. We got to take care of infrastructure, then have some special projects. We need infrastructure work, not fantasy land. Now, my statement. The city manager is very hard at work. In fact, he is so busy doing all of his work, he's doing the work of 3 men, Larry, Curly, and Moe.
Thank you. Okay, next we have our council comments. Ms. Ninny, would you like to start for us?
Thank you. First, I would like to congratulate our new council members-elect, Rodney Muterspaw and Zach Farrell. I had the pleasure to talk with both of them when they were candidates and now since their election. I look forward to working with them, and I'm encouraged by their positive attitudes and eagerness to get a running start. These two are going to work hard and be faced with hard decisions, and I wish them all the best. Secondly, I would like to thank both Amy Vittori and Joe Mulligan for their time and dedication to the city of Middletown. It has truly been an honor to serve with them both at the dais and in the community. I am sure that we will continue to see their passion and support for the city. Lastly, I just want to touch on a common theme that has been present in many discussions as we prepare for this transition, and that is respect. It is our responsibility to set a positive example in our roles as city and community leaders. Showing respect to each other, to city staff, to citizens, and to our neighbors is more important than ever because, trust me, people are paying attention. The bullying has gotten out of control, and there should be a zero-tolerance policy in these chambers. I just ask that we collectively consider that we are all in this together, doing our very best for our city and our community. We won't always agree, but the personal attacks have got to stop. Thank you, Mayor. That's all I have tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Moon?
Yes, I too would like to extend my congratulations to Zach and Rodney. Obviously, I worked with Rodney for nearly 4 years when he was police chief, and we got along great, and we were good friends, and I look forward to working with him again. Don't know Zach nearly as well, but I'm sure we will get to know each other very well, and I extend my congratulations to him. Unlike Monica, I'm not going to speak about you two tonight. I'll save that for the last meeting in December, so you can look forward to that. One announcement, December 4th, there's going to be Cookies with Santa at the Warbirds Museum at the airport. Bring your kids. It's going to be from 1 p.m. till I believe 4 p.m. and would like to thank Tim Epperhart for helping put that on. Last thing I wanted to mention is just somewhat of a personal item. I try to be respectful and listen to everyone and mute my phone and not look at it during council meetings, but my wife is 39 weeks pregnant, so if over the next couple weeks and month you see me checking my phone more often than I normally would, that's why. So that's all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Mulligan?
Thank you, Judge, or Your Honor, excuse me. I add my congratulations to Mr. Mutispa and Mr. Farrell. Congratulations on their successful campaigns. Look forward to them taking office in January and working with this group on council and staff to advance the city in the right direction. I know it's for me it's been a pleasure and an honor to serve on council in this role, and I hope they enjoy success and enrichment by it too. Had the opportunity on Thursday, November 11th, to attend the American Legion Post 218 Veterans Day celebration. I appreciate their hospitality and also offer congratulations to our own Health Commissioner, Jackie Phillips Carter. She was awarded the George Verity Award for her service to the community. Very well deserved, some great remarks. And Jackie, everybody that knows her just loves her and has the utmost respect. And finally, wishing everyone a very happy and blessed Thanksgiving holiday.
Thank you. Ms. Vittori?
I also want to congratulate the soon-to-be council members. I too have worked with Rodney very closely over the years, and we enjoy a really good friendship. And I think that he and Zach will bring some great new energy, and I look forward to seeing what they get accomplished during their 4 years. I also want to congratulate Jackie Phillips. She is a phenomenal human being. She's inspirational to me, and this award was much deserved. I think in the past few years, she's undergone probably more than anyone in this city to try to uphold the safety of our community, and it has not been easy. So I really admire her and thank her and her staff for everything they've done. I also just wanted to share that myself, I did get my ethics opinion with regard to Hollywoodland, and I am allowed to vote, so I know there were lots of comments and thoughts about that, but the Ethics Commission, whose job it is to make that decision, has made it, and I am allowed to vote. So not that I'm going to say we're doing that, and I actually have some thoughts I'll share in new business about that, but I did want to let those who are concerned know that I am approved to make comments and vote on Hollywoodland as necessary. Thank you.
I just have one small thing to add. On the 7th of December, after the council meeting, we will be holding the State of the City address. So just look for that. We'll put some details out there, I'm sure, but just thought I'd mention that, and that's all I have to add this evening, which brings us to our city manager reports.
Yes, good evening, Madam Mayor, members of City Council. We have listed tonight under City Manager's report a detailed report from our Director of Public Works and Utilities, Scott Tadish, on the Central Avenue improvement projects. But just prior to Scott coming up here, there's just a couple of quick things I wanted to note. First of all, I think you were all aware that we had spent quite some time recruiting a new finance director, and that wasn't the easiest thing, and we actually wound up using management partners to help us, the same group that had assisted the city in finding a city manager. And I'm really pleased to say that that has resulted in us finding and naming a new finance director, and that gentleman is Nathan Cahall, and Nathan is with us tonight. He comes to us most recently from Plain City, Ohio. And if he could, I would love it if Nathan could just come up briefly and introduce himself, because you'll see a whole lot more of him in the near future. We're really excited to have him. He's a great guy, and we're looking forward to the skills that he brings with him. So, Nathan?
Mayor, members of council, really wasn't expecting a cameo tonight, but as Mr. Palaniuk said, started actually yesterday. I'm drinking out of a fire hose, but really excited to help serve the city manager, ultimately you folks, as this city continues its rebirth and revitalization efforts. And I have to just say a huge thank you to all the wonderful staff here at the city for being so welcoming and kind to my first few days here. And I look forward to, through the city manager, working with all of you here for the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Nathan. I just ask everyone then to continue to welcome Nathan to our midst. Secondly, just briefly, I wanted to mention that our Middletown firefighters, they had held a golf outing this last summer as a fundraiser in August, and they were able to raise $16,564.98. And just this last week or two, they wound up donating and awarding that to the new Midway Baseball Group, which is really quite incredible. Not only do these folks do such a great job for the city every day and working for us as firefighters and first responders, but they give of their time in civic endeavors like this as well. So that effort that they put in is going to go a long way to really jumpstart that effort. You know, they're able to, as a result, be able to now buy and purchase equipment and uniforms and umpire fees, field preparation, other things. So just want a real shout out to the Firefighters Association for continuing to commit to their community and do things like that. So thanks for that. And last, Scott Tedish, our Director of Public Works and Utilities, is going to provide an update and kind of details on the Central Avenue Improvement Project, which, of course, we've all been waiting for quite a number of years now, and we'll be looking forward to it early in 2022. Scott.
All right, thank you and good evening. As mentioned, I'll give a update on the project. We'll show some pretty pictures and talk about the details and be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time. So this project includes approximately or just over a half mile of a segment of Central Avenue between Canal Street and University Boulevard through downtown. And includes the full width of existing right-of-way, generally from building face to building face. The project includes full depth pavement replacement, all new curb and gutter, a new stormwater system, water main replacement, combined sewer rehabilitation by trenchless relining. There will be significant pedestrian safety upgrades, including new sidewalks and enhanced crosswalks with curb bump outs at each intersection to reduce the length of the crosswalks. The project includes extensive streetscape improvements with a paver amenity strip between the curb and sidewalk with decorative street furnishings, including benches, bike racks, and new trash receptacles. In addition, there will be landscape improvements with street trees and various landscape planters with irrigation and locking electrical outlets throughout the corridor. The existing traffic signals at Canal Street and the Clinton Street intersections will be replaced and upgraded. Left turn lanes will be added between Canal and Clinton for vehicular safety improvements. And finally, all new decorative LED street lighting will be installed and include banner and planter arms, electrical outlets, and be upgradable for future technology improvements. And included with the street lighting, we'll put in more conduit, in case we need it for future technology and infrastructure upgrades such as fiber optic or whatever comes next. Next slide, please. The total estimated construction cost is $6,635,000. This will be funded by a $4,185,000 federal surface transportation block grant obtained through the Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana Regional Council of Governments, with oversight by the Ohio Department of Transportation. The city's local share will be funded by a combination of enterprise funds, including $1 million from the sewer fund, $1 million from the water fund, and $450,000 from our stormwater fund. Next slide, please. This is a rendering of Central Avenue between Canal and Clinton looking west. You will note we have a red and black paver amenity strip and a diamond pattern with a central landscape island with raised planter that creates the left turn lanes for the Canal and Clinton intersections. Next slide, please. And this is just another rendering with people and benches and street furnishings. Next slide, please. This is an elevated view of the same location. Here you can see, a better view of the landscape island. We'll also be able to have some sort of art feature in the median at some point if we decide in the future. Next slide, please. This rendering shows a continuation of the materials to be utilized as you head east from Clinton throughout the remainder of the corridor. Note that the landscape bump outs with street trees that narrow the travel lanes and create a more pedestrian-friendly corridor. Next slide, please. Here you'll see some details on the street furnishings and street lighting. Street furnishings have a traditional look similar to what was used at Sunset Park and include benches, bike racks, and litter amenities as previously mentioned. On the lower left-hand corner or the left side, you'll see the decorative LED teardrop style lights that will be 20 feet tall and capable of holding various amenities, including banners, planters, both hanging and wraparound, and include electrical outlets for additional decorative touches, such as seasonal holiday lighting. Next slide, please. Now I'll just give a brief timeline of where we're at and where we're going. Really, this started in 2018 with obtaining the grant through OKI, which was actually preceded by the adoption of the downtown master plan prior to that. Once the project was programmed, we selected a design consultant in July of 2019 and began preliminary design, which included a stakeholder meeting in November of 2019. This was followed by detailed design beginning in 2020. We had another stakeholder meeting in September of 2020, and there was a virtual ODOT public meeting in November of 2020. Detailed design was completed late August of this year, and the project was advertised for bidding earlier this month. Next slide, please. Going forward, bids will be opened on November 30th. The contract is expected to be awarded at the December 7th City Council meeting. In January, we intend to have a meeting with adjacent property owners to discuss detailed project phasing. I expect construction to start in March of 2022, weather permitting, and substantial completion of the project by December of 2022, weather permitting. Next slide, please. With that, I want to touch on construction management communications. We have engaged with a construction management firm that will include a communications and public relations component. We're actively reviewing the scope and will follow up with additional details, but we expect this to include a comprehensive website with regular updates, social media updates, print material including door hangers, and regular project meetings that will be kicked off in January as mentioned, in partnership with various community stakeholders to discuss specific concerns and individual property owners and business owners. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions. We also have, if anybody has questions out there, they can email us at these addresses, and we also have a current city website for the project with more information.
Do you know, Scott, I had a few downtown businesses asked me, and I'm assuming this might be part of the meetings, but is the city looking to do some serious traffic redirection and signage to really help people still get down and
Right,
about?
right, absolutely. We'll,
Okay.
there will certainly be wayfinding signage provided.
Okay.
People get to those existing businesses.
Okay, and that's something that will probably just be discussed at that meeting with the
Yes,
business.
we'll get into more of the details of the project phasing and how we'll maintain traffic.
Okay, thank you.
Are there gateway enhancements at the university that, I know that you included some renderings in your presentation, but is that part
Not,
of this?
I mean, we sort of have a gateway there already with the wrought iron entrance to downtown, but not specifically
Not in this,
on
okay.
that end. I mean, the character will remain the same throughout the corridor.
Speaking of wayfinding, it may be worth your time engaging the Visitors Bureau to make sure if they have anything. I thought I remember them saying they were working on some wayfinding things, and maybe we're just cohesive in the design of things.
Yeah, that's one of our community stakeholders we'll be working.
Great. Awesome. Great. Anything else? Any other questions? It's really nice.
Thank you.
Great job, thanks, Scott.
Jim, do you have anything else?
No, that concludes our manager's report for this evening.
Great. Ms. Gang, could you please present the consent agendas for us tonight?
For your consideration this evening, we have the confirmation of the personnel appointments of Michael Bishop and Thomas Pence, the position of maintenance worker in the Department of Public Works and Utilities, Stormwater Maintenance Division, Bradley Brown to the position of maintenance worker in the Department of Public Works and Utilities, Water Maintenance Division, Kayla Carl to the position of payroll administrator in the Department of Finance, Division of Treasury, and Anna Matalia to the position of dispatcher in the Department of Public Safety, Division of Police. To confirm the termination of Glenn Glidewell, water reclamation operator in the Public Works Department. To receive and file an oath of office for Anthony Scott. To authorize the purchase of a new Caterpillar mobile generator from Ohio Cat to provide backup power as needed to the wastewater collection system pump stations. To receive and file the escrow agreement between the City of Middletown and U.S. Bank National Association. To receive and file the certificate of estimated life and maximum maturity for the fire levy bonds, and to adjust the contract authorization for the contract between Queen City Mechanicals to install a sanitary sewer connection from the Jets hangar to the city's sanitary sewer from $55,300 to $61,000. Contract authorization was initially approved by council on October 19th, 2021.
I move to approve the issues and actions set forth in the consent agenda.
Second?
Ms. Gang, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Nenny.
Yes.
Mr. Moon.
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan.
Yes.
Mayor Condrey.
Abstain?
Ms. Vettori.
Yes.
Next, we have legislation.
Good evening, Mayor Condrey and members of council. I have 28 pieces of legislation that I get to narrate through on the agenda tonight with you. It's my understanding that you all will typically make a motion to waive the requirements pertaining to second reading and emergency for the specific items on the agenda that are set out that way. In this agenda, it would be items 15 through 23.
I move to waive the charter provision requiring readings on two separate days in that Resolution R 2021-43, Ordinance O 2021-109, Ordinance O 2021-110, Ordinance O 2021-111, Resolution R 2021-44, Ordinance number O 2021-112, and Resolution R 2021-45 be declared emergencies and read one time only.
Second?
I think there's more.
Mr. Mulligan, there's two more.
Goes to 23.
Shameful.
Don't
I'm
cut
sorry
it
about
short.
that. Maybe amend this motion, please. The, included in the previous Resolution R 2021-45, Resolution R 2021-46, and Ordinance O 2021-113. I move that they be declared emergencies, that we waive the charter provision requiring readings on two separate days and read one time only.
I think that 5 of these 9 did not need to be emergency. Personally, we've got Resolution R 2021-43, Ordinance Number O 2021-109, Ordinance O 2021-110, Ordinance O 2021-111, and Resolution R 2021-46. There was a way to have done this by prior proper planning, so I will not be personally voting yes for this, and I'm just stating that as which ones, because I would really like to see a shift in the emergency legislation items. Are there any other comments before we vote? Okay, Ms. Gank, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Condrey?
No?
Ms. Nenny?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Great. The first item of legislation on the agenda is ordinance number O 2021-95, an ordinance authorizing an amendment to the Community Reinvestment Area Agreement between the City of Middletown, O'Reilly Auto Enterprises LLC, and Agree Middletown, Ohio LLC. It's the second reading.
So move for adoption.
Second?
Mr. Palanick, did you want to add anything to any of these items before we discuss?
Madam Mayor, members of council, this item as well as the next 3 were each those amendments to the Community Reinvestment Act. We had discussed them in some detail last time. If anyone has any questions at all, we would be more than happy to respond.
Are there any comments or questions from council on this one?
I just had one thing, and I sort of spoke with Economic Director Lyons after the last meeting, because I felt like I still had a few more questions, and understanding Ordinance 2021-96 and 98, and why those numbers went down to 0 payroll and 1 employee. And I just want to clarify that she explained to me that the reason for that was that both of those are pertaining to landlords that own a building and do not have payroll, and that's why the 0 payroll number was opted for in the restructuring of those agreements. And I think there's been just a little bit of confusion about that in the public and people's understanding of what that $0 amount means and the 1 employee. It's not very typical in my understanding of this for landlords to be required to report on payroll numbers for their tenants, and that's why this should have been structured in this way to start, based on property value increase and not on an increase in payroll numbers for these specific 2 items. So I just wanted to comment on that and just sort of make that clarification based on our conversation.
I would assume that's why item 27 and 28, which are also CRAs that are landlords, have the same stipulations. And I did want to speak to Ms. Tanovan's concerns, because I do think it's important that you raise, they're fair concerns. But I do think it's important that the public know that they are getting something for it. And I mentioned this at the last meeting. A lot of these buildings were either unused or underutilized, such as BMW, or Sorg Mansion, which is now a beautiful home that was being underutilized before, or the Spoken building. The city is getting an enhanced and improved building, and they are also getting the income tax from the businesses that either locate in those buildings or the tenants that locate in those buildings. So there is a return, certainly, that the buildings are being improved, and I think that is the intent of the law, that we reinvest in those buildings that have been underutilized. So, just my thoughts.
With this one in particular, the job creation period, I'm just going to restate what I did the last meeting, but it was January 1st, 2018, with all jobs in place by December 31st, 2018. So this was not COVID-related, as mentioned in the staff report. This one, we should have brought this up quite a long time ago, because they've been in default for a long time now. Any other comments or questions? Ms. Gank, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Condrey?
No.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Ms. Nenny?
Yes.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
All right. Second item tonight is ordinance number O-2021-96, an ordinance authorizing an amendment to the Community Reinvestment Area Agreement between the City of Middletown and Torchlight Pass LLC. This is a second reading.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Any comments or questions on this one? For this one, the job creation period was January 1st, 2017, with all jobs in place by December 31st, 2019. So again, not COVID related. Yeah, I mean, my point on these is if it was signed into agreement, I personally don't feel, I'm allowed to have that feeling. I know you're shaking your head at me, but I do not feel we should be changing them. So that is my opinion. Yep. And as such, this is not COVID related, and I don't feel like that should be altered. And that is what the staff report referenced, by the way, was COVID related to all of them. So if that wasn't the issue with these first two, then that should not have been in the staff report for either of these first two items. Any other comments or questions on this one? Okay, Ms. Skank, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Condrey,
No.
Ms. Vettori,
Abstain.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan.
Yes.
Item 3 this evening is ordinance number O-2021-97, an ordinance authorizing a second amendment to the Community Reinvestment Area Agreement between the City of Middletown and Mike Allen Real Estate Holdings LLC and Allen Group Enterprise LLC, DBA BMW Motorcycles of Greater Cincinnati. This is the second reading.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Any comments or questions on this one?
So this is a second amendment, which means there was a first amendment, and I think something, just to reiterate what Mr. Moon was saying, is that we often amend agreements. I think, would you say, Austin, that amendments are part of the course of doing business and government, that when circumstances change or things need to be handled, we do amendments, and we've, at this council, voted on many amendments.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you have a contract, you can, if the parties are struggling, or even if they're not, they can revisit the terms of the contract and try to amend them. I think staff probably receives more requests for amendment than are ever presented to council for consideration.
And does that mean going forward, no contracts are ever to be held, and it, I guess, would make it difficult for anyone to make a contract stick because you've made amendments in the past? I would think that would mean the world at large would have a hard time with contracts.
I mean, as a legal matter, it's not a precedent-setting thing.
Thank you.
For this one, I would really love to see that we just alter the timeline of the agreement, since the job creation period was January 1st, 2019 through December 31st, 2020, and I'd be happy to extend that, even 2 years, because COVID has definitely taken a hard fall, and I understand that in this case. But I do not agree with changing the terms. Except I agree with changing the timeline of the terms, but not the numbers that were created. Any other comments or questions? Okay, Ms. Skank, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Vettori,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey.
No.
Item 4 this evening is ordinance number O-2021-98, an ordinance authorizing an amendment to the Community Reinvestment Area Agreement between the City of Middletown and MLH Developers. This is the second reading.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Any comments or questions on this one? This is the same comment for me on this one. I would absolutely approve extending the job creation period. On this one, it was January 1st, 2020, with all jobs in place by December 31st, 2021. Obviously, COVID hit that one, so that would be my proposal. Obviously, that's not what's put in front of us, but. Any other comments or questions? Okay, Ms. Skank, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
No.
Ms. Vettori.
Abstain.
Item 5 this evening is ordinance number O-2021-100, an ordinance authorizing a contract with Brandstetter Carroll, Inc. for engineering and design services for the airport runway safety area remediation project. This is the second reading.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Mr. Palanick, did you want to add anything to this since the last?
Nothing unless there were questions.
Any questions or comments from council? Okay, Ms. Skank, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Condrey?
Abstain?
Ms. Nenny?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Item 6 this evening is ordinance number O-2021-101, an ordinance establishing a procedure for and authorizing a contract with Hazen and Sawyer for the design of a lime solids processing facility at the water treatment plant. This is a second reading.
So move for adoption.
Mr. Palanick, did you have anything to add on this?
Nothing further.
Any comments or questions from council? Okay, Ms. Skank, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Condrey?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Ms. Nenny?
Yes.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Item 7 this evening is ordinance number O-2021-102, an ordinance establishing a procedure for and authorizing purchases of asphalt by the city purchasing agent in 2022. This is a second reading.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Mr. Palanick, did you have anything to add?
Sorry,
No.
who seconded that?
Ms.
I'm
Nenny.
sorry. Thank you.
Still Ms. Nenny.
Routine purchase of asphalt, nothing further.
I would love to see, I think that the idea of the collective purchasing that was raised earlier was a really good one. I know the reason we didn't do it before was our project scale was out of balance with the neighboring city projects, but if it's still possible to look into that in alignment with this purchasing agreement, I think it could be of use to us to save a little money in cooperative purchasing. Any comments or questions from you? Ms. Skank, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Condrey?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Ms. Nenny?
Yes.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Item 8 this evening is ordinance number O-2021-103, an ordinance authorizing a contract with Duke Energy for capital upgrades to convert streetlights to LED heads. Phase 2 is a second reading.
So move for adoption.
Second?
Mr. Palanick, did you want to add anything?
Not unless there are questions.
I just wanted to point this out just for public consumption. The point of doing this was to help pay down some of the debt for fire stations, correct, Mr. Palanick?
The point is really twofold. Number one, we're going to save $140,000 a year in electricity no matter what. So it's a really good return on investment. But the second part of that is very clearly that those savings can then be put toward the debt service on those fire stations.
And I know I had advocated for finding a way to fund a fire station as a separate way, separately from just the levy fund. So I wanted future councils to know that certainly it's my intent that they would take these savings and earmark it for paying that debt down more quickly should it go through. And that's kind of the reasoning, at least for me, to support moving along with this legislation tonight. That's all I had, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, Ms. Skank, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Ms. Nenny?
Yes.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Condrey?
Yes.
Item 9 this evening is ordinance number O-2021-104, an ordinance authorizing the amendment of a contract with Rumpke of Ohio, Inc. for refuse collection and disposal. It's a second reading.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Mr. Palanick, anything to add?
Nothing.
Any comments or questions from council? Ms. Skank, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Nenny?
Yes.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Condrey?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Item 10 this evening is ordinance number O-2021-105, an ordinance establishing pay ranges, pay policy, and benefits for various salaried and hourly classifications within the service of the city. It's a second reading.
So move for adoption.
Second?
Mr. Palanick?
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of City Council, I will comment on this because, as we had indicated in a correspondence earlier this week to you all, there is a additional change from the first reading on this particular item. Actually, these the ones that are pertaining to both 21-105, 21-106, and that is for the compensation, the classifications, I should say, for the positions of Assistant Director of Public Works and Public Utilities, along with Director of Public Works and Public Utilities. Those have been altered because of when we recently looked to hire a city engineer, the recognition that we have to effectively pay more. In the paying more of that position, there's a compression that then happens with those folks who ultimately then are above them. So to try to make this far more competitive with our fellow communities around the region that are all trying desperately to hire qualified engineers, we made those changes. So I wanted to note that.
Those were some pretty major changes that came to us yesterday. Is it possible to request a second reading for this at the next meeting? Because I have questions that I know I emailed that didn't get answered yet.
I guess I would look to Mr. Musser if that's something that's, a normal format that we could just do, then yeah, that.
Yeah, if there's no urgency, then council could make a motion to continue this to the next meeting.
I don't know I know we probably need to do this by the end of the year. I'm guessing,
We do typically, yeah.
Second reading, and it won't be effective until 31 days after passage.
So it would have to be a second reading emergency at the next meeting if we did
It would,
that way.
yes.
Which I wouldn't mind. I had asked for comparable salary for those positions elsewhere, just because I started looking at the racking and stacking of who now department head-wise is getting paid what and in what order, and it seems a little out of whack. We've got our Public Works Director 2 entire pay scales or pay rates above anyone else, followed by 3 that are now on the same pay scale: Finance Director, City Engineer, and Assistant Director of Public Works, which the Assistant Director of Public Works is now getting paid more than other department heads and more than the police chief, the fire chief. I think we're got a little bit out of line on some of, like, as far as the ordering of these, and it's not exactly where I wouldn't expect an assistant director of public works to be paid more than our police chief, our fire chief, or our economic development director. And it doesn't seem quite where I was thinking we should be or have been, for that matter.
I guess, again, this goes back to the market, and sometimes whether we think it's appropriate on its face or not is not in recognition of what the market says, what the market pays.
And that's why I asked the question for these positions, what is the market, at least, I don't know what the right radius is. Is it 2-hour radius? Is it a 5-hour radius? I don't know. I mean, I looked up I was trying to figure out myself because I don't know how to find that data personally. I looked on ZipRecruiter and pulled some numbers, but I don't even want to use those because I don't know that they're accurate. So I don't want to base a decision on something that I found on a website, if you know what I mean. So I would rather get it from a more reputable source and be able to base our decisions on that.
How long has the city engineer position been open?
A very long time. Scott, do you recall when this first came open? About 6 months.
And have we gotten resumes? Have we heard that it's just an issue because we're so far away from the market?
Most of the people we talk to are, even at a much lower level, are already making substantially more than, where we were at. So we could continue this forever and simply not hire anybody, or we could recognize the market. And that's our problem. That's what we're running up against. And our comparables, and that's what we look at, are, Hamilton, Fairfield, other older urban core communities in and around our region. And those consistently show, what we're doing in this case. And we can certainly provide you those kinds of numbers, but I think you're going to see that they're all struggling as well. And even though they are, in fact, higher, and we're going to be more consistent with them, it's a struggle. I mean, talented engineers with background and skills and tenure are very, very hard to find, because in the private sector, they're making, 1.5 times what we pay in the public sector. So,
and I think that is the case for probably the majority of these director positions that we have. And so I understand the engineer is hard to fill, but we also have other positions that are equal, of great talent, that if one of them were to leave, how hard would it be for us to fill those shoes? And so we may end up in that position again and again and again. So I'd like to have a semblance of the order that we really want to have the pay scale in. And then if we have to be, I don't know if there's other ways to be creative with bonuses for hiring in order to get some of these qualified individuals. I don't know HR-wise or regulation-wise where that stands, because it looks like we're now topped out. I mean, we can't move anywhere with our Director of Public Works. He's getting the highest pay that is offered in the city. And now we just keep bumping everything up to that, and then what happens?
Well, I think what I can offer is in the budget that you're hopefully will approve this evening, we have funding to do a new compensation classification study so that an external professional consultant will look at every classification on our behalf and provide us those kinds of, analysis and recommendations. But in the meantime, we have the sorts of things that you have to deal with because you're way out of line and you know it, and it's very clear, and you bring that forward based on your professional background, so that's what we're doing in this case. We're trying to solve our problem and finding, quality recruits, and then in turn, dealing with the compression that causes. So we believe this is an appropriate and a good recommendation, and stand up to your decision, whatever that is.
So my request would be to get, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 positions, and I can email the exact positions to you. I can't remember exactly which details I asked in that email, but I would like to see the comparable salaries around us, just so if we're improving this for a whole year of salaries, that we're looking at not just Public Works, but at all of those department heads at large, so we kind of do it the right way in one vote.
I think I'll point out too, we are not approving salaries, we are approving classifications. They're broad classifications so that they're ranges of salaries. But in some cases, even the top is so low that if we don't put them into a new classification, we can't be competitive. So determining specific salaries are done through the budget and through action of the city manager, but these are classification changes.
Are you saying you want to consider classification changes across the board then?
I would like to look at all of the directors, and I guess in this case, assistant directors, since we've got the assistant director of Public Works in that mix as well, just to look at, are we in line in other areas when it comes to directors?
Sounds like we're probably not. So I'm just kind of flash forwarding to the next meeting if it shows that those are also totally out of whack. I mean, I don't know if that's something we'll be able to address and then emergency pass. And so I'm just trying to think through what we can do, to your point.
Right.
If it's worth ultimately waiting, I mean, I guess we can, but if it's not going to prove anything else out that we could effectuate in terms of the other top lines, and I think that's what the consultant's for. I just want to be clear on the expectation, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I just don't like the messaging that we're putting out with the order, with the director of Public Works, and no offense, Scott, you do a great job. It's just the order of that, being 3 entire pay rates scales above our police and fire chiefs, who are, incredibly high-risk jobs, high stress, on call at all times, responsible for the safety of personnel, which is also part of Public Works. But I just think we're really out of line, and being 3 pay scales different.
So what are we hoping to accomplish? Just to set staff up to succeed. You want to see if we're out of whack on the other ones also, and then if we are,
then we may need to bump them up as well.
Do you want to see that in the legislation? Because that would go back to a first reading if we're adding other people, correct? I would think.
You can amend the tables in here.
Okay.
Yeah, between readings. That's okay. The point of the readings is just to give notice that this is a topic that's being considered by council.
We would do a second emergency with new potential bans in there. I just want to be clear because I want you to feel comfortable with if that's what happens.
Yeah, if that's...
The other thing I will stipulate to right now is it's almost certain that virtually every employee classification in the city of Middletown is undercompensated in relation to comparables in this region. We know that. We haven't had the resources in the past to do that. To the extent we have the resources to do that, we want to do a complete compensation and classification study, so we do that with some professionalism rather than by the seat of our pants. But we were trying to solve one specific problem that we know is very acute at this point in time. And the other problem with this is we can hope to make all those, I'd love to make all those changes, but it does affect the budget dramatically. So, then you're going to have to say within the budget, where is that money coming from? So that's another part of the discussion. Keep that in mind.
Would this affect any hiring that is potentially pending? like, I know we don't have a city engineer, for example.
Yes, we're trying to hire that city engineer very clearly, and we cannot find one if we're going to pay less than what this contemplates.
How long do you think, oh, I'm sorry. How long do you think that study will take? Because it seems like we just need this to be figured out and that the study potentially is going to take a few months. And so is that too long to wait to bump up an engineer?
We expected to bring it forward sometime in the new year, in the new budget, that it would be a process that once we bid the work out, that would take a month and a half. The work itself would be 3 to 4 months. There's a lot of interviews that have to go on throughout the organization. So by the time it would be complete, it would probably be, July or August, something like that.
So that's why you're looking for this role to be pulled out, because we really don't want to wait that long.
Exactly.
For the engineer.
Because in the meantime, we continue not to have a city engineer.
Right.
And potentially lose the people that we have in some of these roles to other places.
Understood.
Are there abilities in city government to provide bonuses, sign-on bonuses? Any other?
There are, and in fact, you have at least one item on your meeting tonight specifically to that effect.
Is that an option in this city engineer case that we think would get us anywhere? I mean, I know obviously we're still at a certain salary range, but is that something being done in other places? Is it something we think may?
I would say there's a whole lot more than that than being done, but I don't think we're quite prepared to do that. Things like paying the complete cost of their contribution to the pension program, paying housing allowance, paying, contributions to deferred compensation, lots of other things. It's a very competitive world out there, particularly with certain types of jobs, and engineers come in at the top of that list.
Is that something the compensation study, I'm assuming, would look at as well, or how to use those alternatives?
We certainly could have that included, yeah, because I think it is a very changing landscape that we're all seeing right now. I mean, the sort of the great resignation, people are looking at work very differently. And, a lot of professions, it's just very difficult to find, to recruit, to pay. And we have to recognize what it looks like in the future.
Mayor, I'm not unsympathetic to your concerns, because I think they're fair. I think for this, my opinion is we probably need to move forward, because we have an acute need with a specific position. We're doing $50 million in paving this year and last year. City engineer typically, I believe, would oversee that. I very much look forward to seeing what the study has and to the point of your concerns. But for this, I would suggest that we move forward.
I agree. I mean, I think attracting and retaining high-quality employees is important. And this sends the message that filling this position at a pay rate that is appropriate is a priority for us, and I'm ready to go ahead and move forward with this. And also look forward to the studies and understanding where the rest of our department heads fall in terms of, where their comps are. And I think that that's something that obviously you guys are making a priority, and I look forward to.
Yeah, I appreciate your line of questioning. I just think that the pushing it down, looking at what still could happen in a couple weeks, I don't see a big difference in what we're able to execute. So I feel like if we're going to make the decision, we might as well make it now.
Can I ask why the Director of Public Works went up? I mean, it's 2 pay rates above the next highest. I mean, it skipped an entire one. Is there any reason why the Director of Public Works isn't at 168, the proposal?
It's really dealing with the compression from underneath, so that there's still the difference between an assistant and the city engineer. That's really the only reason.
And they're at 169.
That's correct, yeah.
So we need two pay scales difference. Is that done?
And you're referencing specifically I think the old. There's also the new version, which it's 288, for instance, or versus 282.
Okay,
and
yeah,
285.
I'm referencing the older one.
So it does affect both ordinances.
And is that done in other departments where there's 2 pay scales difference?
Classification differences. So again, if it's appropriate, yeah, we may.
Okay. Well, it sounds like people are ready to go ahead and vote on this tonight, so I don't want to stop that. But thank you for the discussion. I appreciate it a lot, and I know city staff all is very deserving of their salaries and getting a recognition, and so I'm glad we can take the time to talk about it.
I want to apologize that you got it late. That's my fault. When we made the change and I put the packet together, I chose the wrong one. So the packet that I sent out last Friday was the old legislation. And I sent you guys out on Thursday.
Got it.
Okay? But that was my fault.
Okay.
They were named the same thing, and the rest of the title that said revised was hidden, and so I just chose the wrong one. And then Scott actually pointed it out and said, I think you got the wrong thing in there, and so that's when I sent the new legislation and the staff report, but that was just an error on my part. When I went to choose it, I just chose the wrong one.
I think we got the email from Jim yesterday as well, explaining it.
Yeah, but when I became aware of my mistake, I fixed it as quickly as I could.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
No.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Ms. Vettori.
Yes.
Item 11 on the agenda tonight is ordinance number O-2021-106, an ordinance establishing pay ranges, pay policy, and benefits for various salaried and hourly classifications within the service of the city that are hired January 1, 2018 or later. This is a second reading.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Mr. Palanick, did you want to speak to this one?
Just to be clear so that everyone understands, the item that we just dealt with, Ordinance 21-105, that was the ordinance that deals with employees who were hired prior to January 1st of 2018. And this one that you're now addressing is the ordinance that deals with those employees who were hired on January 1st of 18 or after. So because some things changed along the way, we always consistently have to have these 2 ordinances that in many, many ways are very much the same, but in just a few minor ways they are different because of some of the things that changed for what we'll call legacy employees versus more newly hired employees.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on this one? Okay, Ms. Skank, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
No.
Ms. Vettori,
Yes.
Ms. Nanny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Item 12 this evening is ordinance number O-2021-107, an ordinance establishing pay ranges and certain benefits for employee classifications in the Middletown Department of Health and Environment. This is a second reading.
So move for adoption.
Second?
Mr. Palanick, did you have anything to add on this one?
This one, again, for clarification, is that ordinance that pertains specifically to employees within the health department.
Any comments or questions on this one? Okay, Ms. Skank, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Condrey,
Yes.
Ms. Vettori,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan.
Yes.
Item 13 is resolution number R-2021-41, a resolution to make appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the city of Middletown, counties of Butler and Warren, state of Ohio, for the period ending December 31, 2022, annual budget 2022. It's a second reading.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Mr. Palanick, did you want to add anything here?
This is the fiscal year 2022 comprehensive budget for the city. We've had quite a number of meetings and discussions, so if there are any specific questions, I'm more than happy to respond.
Any comments or questions from council? Okay, Ms. Skank, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Vettori,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey.
Yes.
Item 14 is resolution number R-2021-42, a resolution establishing a budget for the use of American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 funds by the city of Middletown. It's a second reading.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Mr. Palanick, did you have any comments or questions about this one?
This is the budget for the American Rescue Plan Act, and unlike our typical yearly budget, this is really a 3-year time frame, so 2022 through 2024. And also somewhat different than our regular budget is these are classifications of expenditures, a sort of letter of intent, if you will, but none of these dollars get expended until or unless City Council takes additional future action to either contractually obligate them or appropriate them separately.
So this is more for strategic planning purposes for city staff, as well as, I believe, reporting to the federal government. Is that accurate?
Yes, and just so that everybody can plan, so that you can continue to work on things or projects or other things, knowing that the intent at least has been stated that those funds could be available.
But that could change. It's kind of a framework. So if a project doesn't happen in one place, those funds don't get appropriated, and they could go somewhere else.
That's correct. Yeah, ultimately. So long as they meet the federal standards, obviously.
I know the question was raised, and this might be more of a question for Mr. Musser, but Mr. Palaniuk, if you want to answer, that's fine. Just because the legislation says appropriate, it doesn't mean it's appropriation. It is baked deeper into the legislation specifically that we have to authorize that. Is that correct, Mr. Musser?
Yes, that's correct.
Well, would it be appropriate to delay a vote on this, given that, you know, the December 7th meeting does contain a significant portion of the ARPA funds? I mean, would that be out of line to wait until after that December 7th meeting to see?
I guess I don't know if the December 7th meeting, in fact, contains any portion of those funds, so I'm not entirely
The
certain.
Riverfront Development Project,
Yeah.
isn't that
I
on
don't think that's going to be on there.
I don't think that will reappear on December 7th.
Okay.
We've had a second reading. There would have to be 3 council members that wanted to, or 2 council members. I don't know.
3.
I'm sorry, I wasn't aware that it was
That
pulled.
want to bring
Okay.
it back up, so. So at this, it's a placeholder to Mr. Kohler's point about something along the river.
Yeah, I think, you know, we are always been very consistent in wanting to do, you know, significant, important, transformative, high-quality development on the riverfront and in downtown. And certainly our hope is that we continue to have that intent. And, you know, if it isn't one particular project, then certainly it may be something else. But I would love to have us continue to plan in that direction and know that that is our goal, and to tell the world that it's our goal to do high-quality development that will really impact and revitalize and create vitality to the downtown and the riverfront.
I would personally like to see, and I'm throwing this number out, but because it's, of course, very hard to pin down exact numbers, but about 3 million of that riverfront redevelopment be redistributed, just given that I don't believe that we will be moving forward with the development that was initially proposed, but I do think that there's value in so many other projects that have been put on the ARPA budget, and I don't anticipate the county will probably fulfill every one of the line items that we have asked of them. And so I would like to propose that we take, and like I said, 3 million is just a number I'm kind of picking, but and earmark it for what the county is not able to or willing to help us with. Paperboard being probably the biggest piece of the puzzle, and if we don't get the funds for that, we need to still do it. Now, of course, there's state brownfield grants that are out there that we may still try to get, and there's other forms of that, but I want to make sure that we do allocate money to especially that paperboard demolition and making sure that that makes its way forward. The other big project that I really, really think is so critical to our city is this community center, and so if we needed to earmark more funds for that because the county is not able to help, I would like to take it from that 7.5 million personally. And I think that the rest of that, I would love to see if we can make more of that riverfront shovel ready for the right development project. So whatever, you know, we do earmark for that, I'd like to see it, make it so that when someone comes in, it's actually ready to develop instead of having a lot of conjecture about what's even able to be used.
Do we have a sense, not to get into a long conversation, but do we have a sense of that Riverfront, how much would be truly effective for shovel readiness of 7.5? Like, do you need 7.5 million to do all the things to make it shovel ready? I mean, I don't think, I know what was in the list of the things, but I don't know assigning numbers. Does anyone have a sense of that?
Again, I'm not in
Prepared.
position to respond to that tonight. I think the point being is we want to make it clear we want to do high quality transformative things to the downtown and the riverfront. And I think without appropriating it, there's nothing lost. It can always be reappropriated in the future, but it's very careful to send the right message to the right places. One of them is not necessarily to tell the county that we can get by without what we've asked them for. I think it's real clear we believe they should give it to us, and hopefully they will. And if they don't, we make that decision in the future, but I don't want to send the message to them that somehow we can get along without it, so, or anything else. But those decisions can be made in the future if that becomes the issue.
Any other thoughts on the ARPA budget? Okay. Well, I personally would like to see it amended, but I know that's not probably where we're going. Okay. Ms. Skank, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Nenny.
Yes.
Mr. Moon.
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan.
Abstain.
Mayor Condrey.
No.
Ms. Vettori.
Yes.
Item 15 this evening is resolution number R 2021-43, a resolution to make adjustments to appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Middletown, counties of Butler and Warren, State of Ohio, for the period ending December 31, 2021, and declaring an emergency, general and airport funds.
So move for adoption.
Second?
Mr. Palanick, would you like to present this one?
Yes, and I'd like to talk about actually this item as a companion to the next one because they're integrally linked. So what we're proposing to do is the airport fund currently has $600,000 in outstanding principal of debt service that goes back to the refinancing of a bond in 2017. With that, there's also interest of about $72,294. And our goal in this action is to effectively pay that off. And what we'd be doing it is through something called defeasance. And you can refund or fully pay out a bond in some cases. And in other cases, if you have a bond that is non-callable, that is, you can't technically repay it off or the bondholders have to continue to be paid, you can defease it, which basically means we'd repay it fully in escrow, and then an escrow agent for the remainder of the life of it pays it out to those bondholders the way it was maintained. But in the meantime, we've fully paid it out. We no longer have the debt on our books. So that's what we're looking to do, essentially use some of our reserves to eliminate this approximate $116,000 a year in debt service. That's an expense against the airport fund, which for years 22 through 27, that will continue. This would eliminate that. What it also would do for us is basically allow us really a better opportunity to work with a management entity that we're hoping to finalize a deal with for managing the airport, and also make it easier and better for a new FBO to basically start from a clean slate so that when we look at the monies that are being produced, it isn't artificially hindered by the idea of the fund also having to pay the debt service. It's simply looking at the operational side of it. So we would be repaying the debt in this case as well as putting it on a better slate for the future. So item 16 is the actual ordinance that would authorize the bond defeasance, and that is a payment of $600,000 in principal, $72,294.42 in interest, and then the cost of issuance of $35,750. So the grand total of $708,044.42. That money would come from the city's general fund reserves. It would get transferred then to the actual airport fund, and then item 15, which is resolution 2143, is the actual appropriation that does it. So in effect, you're appropriating the funds and then approving the bond defeasance. So with that, I would entertain any or all questions.
Any comments or questions for anyone? Okay, Ms. Gank, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
Abstain?
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Ms. Vettori.
Yes.
Item 16 this evening is ordinance number O-2021-109, an ordinance authorizing the defeasance of a portion of the city's outstanding various purpose refunding bonds, Series 2017, and declaring an emergency.
So move for adoption.
Second?
Mr. Palanick, did you have anything to add?
No, this basically we have described in these last two.
Any comments or questions on this? Ms. Gank, you please call the roll?
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey,
Abstain?
Ms. Vettori,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon.
Yes.
Item 17 this evening is ordinance number O-2021-110, an ordinance declaring necessity of bond issue in the amount of $16,800,000 and submitting the question of such bond issue to the electors and declaring an emergency.
So move for adoption.
Second?
Mr. Palanick?
Yes, this is the actual ordinance that is required to declare the necessity for our fire station levy financing. And as we've moved through this, we've always talked about doing this, and we would be doing it as a 1 mil levy. And we found out based on Ohio law that if we were to do this to the electors as a 1 mil levy, unfortunately, we would only raise about half of the amount of money that's necessary to actually do the work that we've contemplated, the approximately $16.8 million. But in turn, if the levy is as a $16,800,000 levy specifically, then you don't have that problem of only raising the half of that amount. So in this case, that's why it is different than the way we had described it before as saying it's a 1 mil levy. However, the way it has been structured and calculated by our financial consultant so that it would not ever be greater than 1 mil, and it could be less than 1 mil. But to do that, and in turn, because we've seen rates go up a good deal in these last number of months since we first brought this forward, we now are estimating a 3.35% per annum, with an expected closing of around June 1 of 2022. The ballot language would actually have to say a not to exceed 30-year term for this. Now, our full expectation would be it would not be 30 years because, number one, we were very, very conservative on our estimates of the valuation for those years. And the expectation is that valuations will go up greater, which means that it would be producing more revenues in each year and then be paid off sooner. And then number two, your effort earlier this evening to do the LED streetlight would also contemplate that future city councils would use most or all of that $140,000 in savings to also pay this down quicker. The only thing is we can't use that within the actual bond legislation because it would be binding the hands of future city councils, and you can't do that. So we hope that happen, but at the same time, you can't rely on it. So therefore, that's why it's a not to exceed 30 years, as opposed to an expectation of having it be 30 years. We're hoping it's much closer to 20. But that's the reason that the language would have to be not to exceed 30 years and $16,800,000. So that does sound a little bit different than a 1 mil levy that we had contemplated for a 25-year period, and that's the reason for it. The companion item, number 18, is a reimbursement resolution that would go along with this. Essentially, this is oftentimes done when you do bond debt financing. And the idea is that if you pass a reimbursement resolution, then dollars spent on behalf of the project after the resolution is passed, but prior to the closing of the bonds, can actually be reimbursed by the bonds. So now this doesn't mean necessarily that we would contemplate any spending of any additional money, because obviously we don't know if the levy would pass. However, it does contemplate the cost of land acquisition, and we technically have not yet closed on the purchase of the last site from Premier Atrium, and that will happen sometime after this resolution is approved. So if it turns out that our $16,800,000 fully covers the station construction and design as well as the purchase of this land, then we could actually reimburse ourselves from that money. If we can't, then nothing lost, but at least we covered that, made it flexible. Also, if we have a ballot that's approved, say, on May the 3rd, and the closing doesn't occur for 1.5 to, say, 3 months after that, then in that time frame, if we expended money on design, that also could be reimbursed from the ultimate proceeds of the closing. So that's the reason for the reimbursement resolution. The first item, of course, is the necessity of actual bond and the placing on the ballot effective May 3rd.
Was the purchase of that Premier land planned to be part of the levy?
It was not, but
I'd rather it not be.
The reimbursement resolution simply allows us, if there's enough funding, if the 16.8 covers everything, that we could reimburse ourselves.
I'd rather.
Doesn't mean that we
shorter.
would, but the resolution would allow it.
Okay. I mean, that wasn't the plan that I was, I know it's, probably pittance in the grand scheme of things, the purchase of the land, but, to me, I'd rather the levy last a shorter period of time and we don't include that in the taxed amount. Does this change the percentage or the amount that is coming out, that citizens are going to have to pay?
No, it's been calculated to never exceed 1 mil, but it could be less than 1 mil. If valuations go up more than we anticipate in any given year, it could be less than 1 mil, but it won't be greater than 1 mil.
So you did mention the LED lights, which I had mentioned earlier. Is it the intent of this council to inform at least our current staff that is what we're looking to use that savings on? I know that's my intent. I guess I'm just wondering if my council colleagues agree that we would like to pass that on to our new finance director that will be here for at least 10 to 20 years to be overseeing this.
Yes, that was the half of the reason I.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, and I was confused, and I don't know that I have clarity on it, but the 16.8 builds 3 fire stations and headquarters, right?
Yes.
Okay. I thought it was, and I could be wrong, but the consensus of council was to use the ARPA funds that we received from the federal government, in the category of lost revenue, to dedicate some of those funds to cover 1 fire station. So I thought that the principal amount was going to be less than 16.8. It would be closer to 13.8, but that's not what we're saying. That's not the plan, I guess.
No, we had proposed it as using it to fund the retrofit of the streetlights to LED, and then having the savings that come from that each year be dedicated to the debt service, which effectively equals a $3 million station. So it does the same thing.
And do we have any updated guidance if at some point down this ARPA funding train, we decided to, are these funds eligible for fire station use? I knew they previously weren't. At the last meeting, though, Ben Yoder told us, well, you can use them for anything in the end. I just want to see if that guidance had changed about the use for fire station, or ARPA funds for fire stations.
I think we've explained probably several times that you can't specifically use them for fire stations, but you can use them for revenue replacement. And when you use them for revenue replacement, the monies that you free up from our own budget can then be used for anything that we can spend our own money on. So with that sort of workaround, yes, a fire station or literally anything we do or can be authorized to do, it can be used at. But we're not technically using ARPA funds for it, we're using our own money for it. We then would be replacing lost revenue with ARPA funds.
down the road, theoretically, if there are ARPA funds left over because projects don't materialize or whatever reason, can you use ARPA funds to pay down some of this debt early? Like if there's $3 million still hanging around, could you pay down?
You cannot use it for debt retirement. However, you can use it for revenue replacement. And if we then use our funds to pay down debt, there's no prohibition to use our funds.
It's kind of fungible. You would put it into some general fund and then you'd use other dollars.
Yes, and that's the sort of bizarre sort of workaround that's been created by creative people when it comes to ARPA until or unless they change that.
Right.
The real key is how much can you do in revenue replacement? That's
Understood.
the issue, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, Ms. Gank, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Condrey,
Yes.
Ms. Vettori,
Yes.
Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
Item 18 this evening is ordinance number O-2021-111, an ordinance authorizing the use of a portion of the proceeds of obligations of the city of Middletown, Ohio, in the estimated principal amount of $16,800,000 to be issued for the purpose of constructing fire facilities, furnishing and equipping the same, improving the sites thereof, and acquiring interests in land as necessary in connection therewith, and declaring an emergency.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Mr. Palanick, did you have anything?
Yeah, this is the reimbursement resolution that we had just described.
Future councils have to authorize those reimbursement to funds?
Yes. I mean, are you thinking like if, for instance, it came to, it was passed, and then the question of, do you want to reimburse yourself for the land acquisition, for instance? Yes, because it's a policy question, and that would have to come back. But, you know, I personally, I don't imagine it would be wonderful, but I'm thinking with inflation, there's no way. You know, our biggest concern will be getting it done with the number, but it's flexibility. You always want to provide your community the greatest opportunity if it exists. So, you know, I want to say that, hey, if we can, we'd love to come back with you and allow you to have that decision. So, you know, why not do it?
And I appreciate the flexibility and the strategy behind it. I agree with the mayor that when we agreed to buy that land, that wasn't really what I had it in mind for, so I'm going to support it, but know that I'm reserving the right to reconsider that in the event that we seek to
Absolutely. And my primary concern about this was just that lag time between bond potentially being approved and the bonds closing. And we would love, and I know the fire department would love, and I know Mr. Snively would love to get that design going as soon as he could, if that happens. So this really allows us to get that started, is what it does more than anything.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, Ms. Gank, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Vettori,
Yes.
Mr. Moon,
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan,
Yes.
I'm sorry,
Two more.
got off track, Ms. Nenny,
Yes.
Mayor Condrey.
Yes.
Item 19 this evening is resolution number R-2021-44, a resolution to make adjustments to appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the city of Middletown, counties of Butler and Warren, state of Ohio, for the period ending December 31, 2021, and declaring an emergency. This is an appropriation transfer general fund.
So move for adoption.
Second?
Mr. Palanick, would you like to comment on this one?
I would, and this is another example. We got a lot of these companions tonight. This is really tied also to number 20, so I will take the opportunity to describe them both. Number 19, which is Resolution R-2144, is a simple budget amendment for fiscal year 2021 of taking $35,000 from the General Fund Police Department patrol salaries and transferring it to the General Fund Police Department dispatcher salaries for the specific purpose of doing what we were talking about a little bit earlier, which is offering bonuses in order to both keep and try to hire dispatchers. Again, we don't compensate our dispatchers competitively with most places around us, so it's very hard to, first of all, recruit them, secondly, to keep them. So pending, additional collective bargaining discussion that might change that in the future, we came up with a shorter term, potential solution of offering $1,500 signing bonuses to folks who would come and take these jobs, but then in acknowledgement of the people that have the jobs, a $2,500 retention bonus for each of the people who serve as dispatchers. So that is item 19. Item 20 is actually the agreement that we have reached with the Fraternal Order of Police, which is the collective bargaining group that represents dispatchers, in which they've agreed to us doing this. So the way this would work is for retention for the existing dispatchers, if they're employed effective November 1st, we pay them $2,500. And so long as they're still employed through May 1st of 2022, they keep it without ever having to pay any of it back. And then for sign-on bonuses for new dispatchers that we would hire, they would get $1,500 with half of it paid out at 3 months and then the other half paid out at 1 year. So again, just a little attempt to try to, again, find and keep people who do a very, very important service for our community.
I know I've mentioned this one quite a few times, but I'm going to mention it again. The alternative section in this report really frustrated me. It says, do not approve the allocation of funds. I feel like it says we're not thinking about alternatives, so I'd really like to see in staff reports that we actually have alternative options listed.
And I think in some ways it's a little tricky because the alternative in this case would be sort of to say to maintain the status quo, which would be to continue to struggle to find people. It seems a little negative to say that as an
Well,
alternative.
there are other alternatives. I can spend 45 minutes and come up with some, but I feel it just makes it feel like we're not thinking outside the box always when I see that. Just my opinion.
I think this is thinking outside the box. The fact is we're doing for the first time something we haven't ever done before, which is, retention bonuses and signing bonuses. So we're kind of proud of it.
Any other comments or questions? Ms. Gank, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Nenny?
Yes.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Condrey?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Item number 20, ordinance number O-2021-112, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the FOP OLC dispatchers regarding recruitment and retention of dispatchers and declaring an emergency.
Move for adoption.
Second.
I know, Mr. Pelnick, you already spoke about this. Did you have anything to add?
No, just to clarify that this is the FOP agreement.
Any comments or questions? Okay, Ms. Gank, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Condrey?
Yes.
Ms. Nenny?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Item 21, resolution number R-2021-45, a resolution adopting the applicable portions of the 2017 to 2022 Butler County, Ohio Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan on behalf of the city of Middletown and declaring an emergency.
So move for adoption.
Second?
Mr. Pelnick?
This specific action would have us adopt formally the Butler County Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan, which is something that the Federal Emergency Management Association, or FEMA as we know it, requires you to have adopted if you are to apply for and potentially be eligible to receive grant funds through FEMA. And right now, we are applying for a grant to potentially fund 75% of the $500,000 cost to put in a new emergency generator for this building. And that grant is got a deadline of November 22nd, 2021. So we realize that while we have always adopted these natural hazard mitigation plans in the past, we hadn't adopted the most recent one. So Butler County's most recent one is 2017 through 2022. The last time we had approved one of these, it was the 2011 through 2017. So we realized that we needed to adopt the newest version, and then that made us fully eligible to then apply for these funds. The plan is a plan that the county, produces on behalf of the entire county, and then each individual jurisdiction adopts it as its own, and basically just has us, doing the kinds of things that, we're normally responsible for in terms of dealing with natural disasters and mitigation against those natural disasters. And of course, by having it and knowing that it's consistent with the rest of the county, then the federal government, assumes that, you're complying and you're eligible then for the grant. So our reason for bringing this, and particularly as an emergency, is primarily to get it so that that grant will be eligible for.
I know I had raised the question in an email, but we already are apparently doing everything in this plan already, so it does not require additional resources above and beyond what we're already doing. Any other comments or questions? Okay, Ms. Gank, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Condrey?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Ms. Nenny?
Yes.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Item 22 is resolution number R 2021-46, a resolution to make adjustments to appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Middletown, Counties of Butler and Warren, State of Ohio, for the period ending December 31, 2021, and declaring an emergency. This is street levy fund.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Mr. Palaniuk?
Yes, this action is the amendment of our fiscal year 2021 budget such that we specifically appropriate $233,433 for interest payment and $2,861,000 for principal payment that are due December 1st of 21 for our street levy. So as you know, we had last year approved the 1/4 of 1% additional income tax for the street bond levy. And then this is the first actual payment of debt service that comes due. And so out of existing funds from that which has been generated now from the levy, we are appropriating the $3,094,433 to make our first payments.
Any comments or questions from council? Okay, Ms. Gank, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Condrey?
Yes.
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Ms. Nenny?
Yes.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Item number 23, ordinance number O 2021-113, an ordinance authorizing an agreement with Cincinnati Commercial Contracting to pay a portion of the costs associated with construction of sanitary, sewer, and water mains in Made Industrial Park and declaring an emergency.
So move for adoption.
Second.
Mr. Palaniuk?
This item, I think we're familiar with the fact that here in these last number of months, the city, its Port Authority, and Cincinnati Commercial Contracting have been partnering to put together a plan that effectively would allow for the extension of the Made Industrial Drive, along with water and sewer mains that would serve newly developed lands in the Made Industrial Park, primarily for the Phoenix Metals, the new $15 million project that's going in there, but at the same time to extend beyond the Phoenix, to open up more acreage, and then to have both the roadway and the water and sewer line in place that would serve those potentially new economic development opportunities for manufacturing. And the Port Authority put together the deal recently when they went to ultimately close, again, sort of as a product of interest rates that were ultimately higher than had been anticipated. They wound up with a gap, that is the private developer, of about $285,000. So they were faced with the decision of, do they go ahead and try to fund, which they didn't really have the funding for, the extensions of the water and the sewer lines to those areas beyond where Phoenix Metal is for projects that haven't yet happened? Or do they alter their construction contract to not do that? And we had discussions with them to say, well, since those are public utilities that will be dedicated to the city and assets of the city, it is not unusual for us, and we've certainly done this in the past, to pay for those extensions, knowing that they then more rapidly would allow us to recruit new manufacturers because the water and sewer lines would already be to the property line. So as a way to have this continue the way it was first anticipated and to get those extensions done, this would have the city's water and sewer capital reserve funds pay for the specific cost of the extension of the sanitary sewer line, as well as the water main that extends beyond Phoenix Metals and that ultimately would be dedicated to the city. So in this case, that's 1,108 linear feet of sanitary sewer at a cost of $98,032.61, and 1,060 linear feet of water main at a cost of $143,185.86. So in combination, that's $241,218.47 that we would be agreeing to reimburse Cincinnati Commercial Contracting for the costs of putting those mains in place. That is something less than their gap, but with that amount, they would be willing to finish it, do it, and then pick up any difference in the gap between 285. So we feel like this made good sense for us at the time, because if in the future we went to extend those lines as a separate standalone project where we had to mobilize and had to bid it out as one small project, it would almost certainly be dramatically more expensive than it is currently.
Boy, doesn't this seem like a good use of ARPA dollars. Infrastructure. If we could directly pay Cincinnati Commercial Contracting, I think that is a perfect use of ARPA funds. It's COVID-related increase in rates, and we wouldn't have to pull it from our enterprise funds, which are our water and sewer bill funds that we've already increased the rates on. I would so much rather see ARPA funds used for something like this if possible. And as you mentioned, it is I understand the benefit because we can now have increased economic importance in the rest of the park, so I can see it coming back to us as well. So I mean, if there's a way to do that, I would much rather see it done through ARPA.
That's not what we proposed this evening, and obviously I don't like to do budgeting on the fly. So our proposal is that this come from the water and sewer funds. But if City Council believes that it should be done differently, we could authorize the expenditure and then look at what a change in the budget might be in the future and where it would come from and how it would balance out. But the key that this project is well underway. It's November the 16th. The weather's getting really bad, and they have to make a decision right now if they're doing the work. So this is to authorize the work specifically. You could authorize it with the potential that in the future, if it's determined that we want to use ARPAs for revenue replacement and or just directly for this, that decision could still be made. But for now, it's authorizing this to be done. But I don't know your answer tonight if that becomes an issue, what we would do to change the budget, where it would come from, and what would be altered, but it could be looked at.
Two questions or thoughts, thinking out loud here. This was the one with Phoenix Metals and Cincinnati from a month or 2 or 3 ago, correct? So we're kind of revisiting that contract.
Yes, it is.
And then recently we had an issue with an easement where we had extended utilities and an easement or dedication hadn't been made, and it created all sorts of issues. I don't know all the legal hoops you have to jump through. I just want to make sure that we don't end up in a similar situation, because it sounds very similar to what we dealt with a couple weeks ago, where city had extended utilities, but the dedication hadn't been made, so there's a debate over who owns the parcel, whether it should have been dedicated to the city, but it wasn't.
Yeah, in this case, obviously, the roadway and the utilities under the roadway will all be dedicated to the city. So I have complete confidence this will all be a dedicated public. It's being built to city standards, will be dedicated to the city, and it's part of the agreement.
And the owner owns the whole park too, so it's not like you have a different owner.
Okay, I got you. Yeah.
Well, I would like to propose that we use ARPA as our primary source of funding for this if possible. I'm not saying that we should delay a vote on it, but if there's a way to change the language, if council is interested in doing that, I think it would be a really great use of the funds.
Jim, for clarification, you did say that this is not actually authorizing the expenditure of that money right now. It's just saying that we authorize the project to move forward, that at a later date, we will have to reimburse those funds.
Well, this action would definitely authorize us to reimburse Cincinnati Commercial Contracting that amount of money.
Okay.
Now, however, if you wanted to add to that we should look at potentially altering the existing ARPA budget so that it could come out of that in some future time, and then just trying to determine what it comes from and then what the balance is, that's up to you. But I have to admit, it would be really nice to hear about these things in advance than trying to do this stuff on the fly in the middle of a public forum.
Well, that's what happens with emergency things too. It's hard to do that all the time. Where was I going to get? I think, I'm supportive of course, the city doing this. I just, I'd like to see that done. Where I was going to go with that is, if we're going to consider using ARPA funds for it, we may need to look at who exactly and how we're reimbursing. I don't know if we have to have an invoice directly from Cincinnati Commercial Contracting.
The only thing we could do is revenue replacement, because we didn't bid this out, and we're not bidding it out according to federal funds. So again, it'd have to be a workaround. You couldn't just say, we're going to use this because it's water or sewer. You would do it because it's revenue replacement, and we do a workaround. So given that, this is more a direction from you all that you want to see that happen in the future.
I would have liked to see this as an alternative in this report, which didn't have any alternatives aside from not doing it. But that being said, I guess we're not going to alter anything now on it. If there's a way to look into reimbursing later with ARPA, of course, that would be a great thing.
Well, I think
we're not changing it now.
I think Jim made a good point about that this would have to be bid out. If we were going to change the funding source, that would have to be bid out to use ARPA funds unless it's revenue replacement. So
Right, so we would be looking at finding a way to use revenue replacement for this, right? Is that the option we're talking about?
Yeah, as a policy matter, we could decide that we're going to replace our revenues to that amount of money, and then use it for that, and then change the budget in a corresponding manner. And that would be direction from City Council.
We don't really have anything else to discuss on this, unless there's a question about the actual legislation item in front of us, right? Okay, Ms. Skank, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Vettori?
Yes.
Ms. Nenny?
yes.
Mr. Moon?
Yes.
Mr. Mulligan?
Yes.
Mayor Condrey?
Yes.
Right. Moving along to our first readings. Item 24, ordinance number O-2021-114, an ordinance authorizing an amendment of ordinance number O-2021-37, which authorized a land swap and development agreement with Dickie D. Brandon, trustee of the OLC Revocable Land Trust, Dickie Brandon and Philip Brandon, first reading.
Mr. Polnick.
Yes, back on May 4th, we authorized a land swap with the Brandons for 2 lots that we were transferring so that they in turn could build new single-family homes on. As they did their due diligence on these 2 lots, and the 2 lots originally that were transferred were in the 4700 block of Bonita Drive and 2119 Roosevelt. Turns out that those were not buildable because of electric lines. So, since then, they have all offered the opportunity to get 2 alternate lots under the same swap that they could still build 2 new single-family homes on. And we're recommending that we now substitute 1605 Lamberton and 815 Maple as 2 alternate lots that they will still then, within 18 months, build single-family homes on. And the agreement would call for, if they didn't do that, then they would pay us $2,500 for the lots. But, again, this is the idea of trying to get new single-family homes on some of these otherwise scattered site lots that are kind of throughout the community that the city winds up having ownership of. And rather than having to maintain them, getting them back in the hands of the private sector, particularly when it's possible to actually build new single-family homes. So that's what this does.
Was the land swap executed?
I'm going to look at Austin. Maybe you know that answer immediately?
My understanding, based on discussions with Ms. Cohen, was that we did do the land swap. So this would be a swap of the parcels that they received for 2 substitute parcels.
So I think there's a problem in the proposal because I looked it up on the auditor's page and it looks like they weren't swapped at all, but yet the agreement tells us that the Brandons are going to give us 4700 Bonita, or the parcel located in that block, as well as 2119 Roosevelt, but the city still owns 4700 block Bonita. So they're not actually giving us that property. We already own it. It was never swapped. So I think it needs to be rewritten.
Okay, so then it's not a swap so much as it is substituting those that are subject to the swap,
Yeah.
or subject to the sale.
Yeah, essentially, I can't remember the name. Brandon. I call him Brandon. I don't know. It's the name on there, but that is 2119 Roosevelt. That's the property that Brandon is giving to the city, and the city is thus then giving back 1605 Lamberton and 815 Maple. So Bonita is not even in the equation at all anymore, but it was never touched on the auditor's page.
I would just proffer that it's possible, because I've gone through this personally, where after a sale is final, the city has to survey it and then give it to the county, and that can take a long time. And so it might be that it just hasn't been recorded. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, and if that's the case, then 2119 Roosevelt would belong to the city, and that one needs to be removed.
Right.
So they're both listed under Brandon right now, and there's no way they should both be listed under Brandon because we're supposed
Just
to swap
check
the
into
properties.
if we've not done the recording or if we've not closed the contract and get it straightened out.
Yeah, Mayor, I'm happy to dig into that before
Okay.
second reading and make sure that we have this right.
Great. And then I'd also was wondering if in the agreement we could change, I think that there was an attempt to make it owner occupied, but the way that it's written, it says it will be sold to a homeowner, which to me, a homeowner, that's anyone who buys the home. It doesn't mean that they have to live in it, but I think that the intent was for it to be owner occupied. Is that an accurate statement of what the intent of the agreement is? Because if so, we may want to specify that a little bit more clearly, instead of it being rental.
I think that is clearly the intent.
And that's more of a question for legal, I suppose. It just seemed weird that it was just said it will be owned by a homeowner, which I don't think is probably.
Yeah, again, I'm happy to visit that before this is in front of you again.
Thank you. And do the terms also, and I know we don't know because the agreement is not in front of us here, but will the terms also give the land back to the city in the case that they don't develop on it? I know we'll get $2,500, but do we also get the land back?
No, the intent is that we would get the $2,500. These are the type of lots that we typically would sell to adjacent homeowners for $500.
Okay.
So I think the thought was if we get $2,500 out of it, that's more than we could probably get.
Got it. Any other comments or questions before we move on? Thank you.
Okay. Item number 25, ordinance number O-2021-115, an ordinance establishing a procedure for and authorizing a contract with Neighborhood Housing Services of Hamilton, Inc. for implementation of a first-time homebuyer assistance program. First reading.
Mr. Palanick.
Yeah, the city yearly receives home funds through the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and over the last number of years, we've consistently used portions and oftentimes large portions of those funds to provide first-time home buyers with down payment assistance. And the entity that has been administering that program for us is Neighborhood Housing Services. So this, again, is a contract with them to use not to exceed $200,000 of home funds to provide down payment assistance, at least 36 separate between $1,000 and $5,000, and then also provide homebuyer education and counseling. And then it also authorizes them to use up to $30,000 for program administration, which amounts to 15% of the total, which is the max limitation of HUD.
Do we have statistics available for this program, like success stories or how many have been given out and what, if they're still in those homes today or?
I know we can easily provide the numbers that have been done in, say, the last 3, 4, 5, whatever number of years. I'm not sure if we have data as to, how long they stay in the home, but we can see what we can find. But I know that we can give you data on how many different, first-time home buyers have been provided both down payment assistance as well as education and counseling.
Mr. Palahniuk, I know we've had some presentations from organizations that we partner with. Could we maybe invite Neighborhood Housing Services to come to a council meeting and give us an update and provide some of those answers for us?
I'm certain we could, yeah. That shouldn't be too difficult. Is that something you'd like to see in the future?
That would be nice, yes.
Okay, we can do that. And I think if we suggest to them at the time, they can give some data and analysis on exactly over the last number of years, how many have, benefited from this and maybe how many of those people are still, for instance, in those homes. So, okay, yeah, I'd love to.
It's not firm data, but I've received many calls over the last 5, 6 years where the allotment has run out and people are still seeking the grant for first-time home buyer assistance. So I would generally say my perception has been it's well received and it's utilized. I don't know how many people are still in those homes, but I've received that call a number of times. So, for what it's worth.
Item number 26, ordinance number O2021-99, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a small business grant agreement with Ohio Soda LLC. First reading.
Mr. Palahniuk.
And again, the theme of this evening are companion pieces. So 26 and 27 are actually a companion, so we'll go through both of them. Ordinance 2199, which is 26, is a proposal for a small business grant agreement to Ohio Soda LLC. In this case, this is for building improvements. The owner here is looking to renovate 5 separate commercial units in a large building and also 10 individual 1-bedroom second-floor residential units in the same building. We would be using $40,000 of the fiscal year 2021 Property Development Fund to fund this. Would also allow 25% of that amount to go to actual facade improvements. The developer in this case is proposing a $744,000 worth of investment, believes that there could be as many as 10 to 15 jobs. Work would be completed in about 6 months. The second companion piece, which is number 27, which is Resolution 2147, for the same property at 1700 Central Avenue, would be granting a tax abatement under the Community Reinvestment Act, or CRA, to, again, Ohio Soda LLC, our standard 100% for 12 years. Again, because of $744,000 in investment, in this case, as a landlord, typical with what you've seen on these others, would have 1 job and no payroll. And then I know that I believe this developer owner may be here in attendance. If you have any specific questions of him, and Director Lyons also, who's been working with them on this, I know she may want to comment on it. So I would offer either of them if they wanted to add anything additional.
Hello, my name's Shane Scott.
And while you're coming up, I would just say I'm pleased to see that market rate is in the contract for the rents. Appreciate that. And the other question I had is, would facade improvements have to go to Historic Commission?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
It's in the historic district, so in a part of the agreement that he follows all permitting and everything of that nature. But, go ahead and tell him about the building. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Shane.
Hello, is it on?
Yeah, it's on.
All right, perfect. Yeah, it's the 1700 block Central Avenue. Basically, it's a 3-story building with 5 commercial units, 10 1-bedroom apartments in a blight part of the area, which obviously I think that's what we've talked about today. From Central down with the improvements coming, I think good timing, basically. We purchased the building and we've got our permits in and everything right now. We're just at that point where we're getting approvals and we want to move quickly on it.
And we toured them last week?
Yep.
Was it this week? I can't remember.
last week.
Hardwood floors are beautiful. Original hardwood floors. They still have the claw bathtubs that they're refurbishing, so they're really, really nice. So it follows our goal of residential vibrancy, trying to bring more residents downtown, and it's, you know, obviously it's a mixed-use development, so we'll see some small retail shops on the lower floors, and he's already working with some possible tenants.
Ton of
Way to-
commitments already.
So, yeah,
It's
a great project.
a matter of getting it done.
Congratulations.
luck, yeah.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Krishna, I just had questions, just some of the numbers the staff reports reference 744,000 in investment. Looks like on the CRA application, it lists 608,000. Where does that $136,000 kind of difference come from?
No, the purchase price was actually $144,000, and there's a $600,000 investment. So it's probably just not on there if that's how it's
So total investment would be
744.
744.
Okay, on the
600.
application, I thought it had $288,000 purchase investment. Okay.
Yeah, there was an error on that, and I think it's because there's two different parcels. Elena kind of looked at this, and we believe the auditor's office put the same sale price for both parcels. So whoever prepared the application, I believe it was your assistant, thought it was 144 times 2 instead of 144 for 2 parcels.
Okay.
But it was 144 sale price for the whole building.
So do we want to make sure the application is accurate before it goes to Ohio, right?
Yep.
Okay. And then the 320,000 of improvements, is that including the city's 40,000? That's what, sorry, I'm again referencing the CRA application, so maybe if that's not the right number, I don't.
No, the correct number is 600,000 in investment.
Okay.
Total investment, we say total investment, it's the acquisition of the building and then the investment after that, so that's the total.
Okay, and is that including the city's 40,000 as well?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, great. I was just trying to put the numbers together and understand what I was looking at. Okay,
Yep.
thank you. Do you mind, I know, but no one can hear you outside of the chambers if you don't.
I do want to make mention that the 1700 block of Central is not located in a historic district, so therefore, to Tal's question, it would not require historic commission. So I just wanted to clarify that
Thank
for
you.
you since you asked.
Thanks. Great, any other comments or questions on that one?
All right. Item 27, resolution number R 2021-47, a resolution authorizing an agreement granting tax abatement to Ohio Soda LLC for redevelopment of 1700 Central Avenue in the downtown Middletown Community Reinvestment Area. First reading.
Mr. Palanick, do you have anything to add on this one? I assume.
No, we just described it.
Sounds good, thank you.
All right. Item 28, resolution number R 2021-48, a resolution authorizing an agreement granting tax abatement to Hutch LLC for redevelopment of 52 South Broad Street, commonly known as the Journal News Building, in the downtown Middletown Community Reinvestment Area. First reading.
Mr. Palanick.
Yes, this also would be looking to authorize a Community Reinvestment Act tax abatement. As Mr. Musser described, 52 South Broad Street, most people know it as the Journal News Building, iconic 52,000 square foot building in our downtown, would be granted 100% abatement for 12 years. The gentleman who owns it, who represents the Hutch LLC, has already repaired the roof. He's replacing all of the windows. I think he's invested at least $378,000 to date, continues to put in a bunch more and will continue to put a bunch more. His hope is to have a restaurant, a bar, a brewery, some maker space, as well as an event venue in there. So we're kind of excited about this project, and we think it's going to be a real nice addition to the downtown once he finishes it all.
Mr. Palanick, CRAs are abating future increases, is that right? So the baseline tax rate stays, and they keep paying taxes as if they had not improved the building, but then the improvement is what is abated. Is that correct? I see a lot of nods.
Yes. Yes.
The auditor's office.
Yeah.
And I think, too, what people tend to forget is you oftentimes take these old buildings and maybe they're worth literally just a few $1,000s, and then they put a lot of investment into it, and then for, say, 12 years in this case, they don't pay those taxes, but at the end of those 12 years, now all that new investment, they do start paying that, and they probably never would have gotten to that point had they not had the benefit of getting the CRA being able to invest all that money and then, have reinvested it in the community. So that's really the bottom line as to why you do it, obviously. It's to get that significant new investment, and then in the future, to take advantage of it.
I think sometimes there can be confusion when we say there's 100% abatement, it's 100% of the future increase.
Yeah, but oftentimes there's very little value to these, and that's why it looks like all of it. It's really just a very significant portion because all the value is coming from all that new investment.
I don't see any of the details of the agreement in here. Am I?
No, you'll see them before the second reading. There's some modifications that we're going to be going through, with some vacation and stuff, so we will get those to you. I think there was still a draft of the agreement.
The application is in there, but everything just says TBD, which obviously that's not actually an application. Okay. One thing I noticed on that application, it had, just in that same portion I was referencing before about investment, it has $128,000 purchase price, and then it has $250,000 in furniture and fixtures, which isn't really a capital improvement that benefits the city. I don't know, how is that the only? I assume he's doing more than that. Is there going to be additional, like a change to that is more than furniture and fixtures as far as what?
There's going to be, a lot of it's to be determined because he hasn't identified an user yet. So if it becomes a restaurant or a bar or a makerspace, that's yet to be determined on what type of investment will be made. I think the investment he's made today has primarily been some lighting and windows. If you've seen the building, he has all new brand new windows in the building and some security issues.
Okay, I was under the impression the use was already determined based on this application. Okay.
The CRA, what it does, it just freezes the value.
So how, I guess without knowing the investment that he's going to put in, how will the CRA be structured without a investment amount in there? Isn't that one of the?
It is, and we'll have an estimate of something, but if it's at least we'll have a minimum.
Okay.
We'll hope that he invests more.
Okay.
There will be a minimum.
Okay, got it. That's why I was like, there's no numbers. Okay. Thank you.
If he doesn't invest, there won't be much to abate. He won't get much of a benefit.
Great. That's the end of our legislation tonight, I believe, right? Whew. That brings us to new business. Do we have any new business items anyone would like to bring up?
Yes, I wanted to bring up the Hollywood land vote and the future of the project. I received my ethics opinion, I think 2 weeks ago, I can't remember the date, and since have been able to talk to a lot of people in the community and answer a lot of questions, and I've heard a lot of curiosity and a lot of interest and a lot of people confused by misinformation, and I think which we can all kind of look at how the project rolled out and what was done and what could have been done better. But what I would like to propose is that the project be judged on its true merits, which I don't think has happened at large. I don't think that the city, because of multiple reasons from, some groups that were very upset from the beginning, and then the inability for us to speak because of ethics, and so there hasn't been a full-sale ability for the city to explain a lot of the things. Like, for example, in year one, I think construction alone would throw off $9 million, which means we could hire a bunch of cops. There's so many good things that people haven't heard. So what I'd like to propose, and I've actually discussed this with one of the upcoming new council members, is that we let it go until the new council. We let these new council members really sit down and hear this project and all the information. And then as a city, we do a 6-week town hall so that people can, around the city, ask questions and get answers. And at the end of it, perhaps we still don't want Hollywood land. Maybe we don't. There's an alternative location, there's a lot of information, but maybe we do. And I would just personally hate to see this potentially transformative project completely go away without really getting a fair shake. And so I was just asking if that might be a plan to do for 2022. If other people supported that idea, rather than not voting on it and just having it go away, at least giving people, again, I've had so many people ask me questions and be surprised by some of the answers, and just give it a fair shake. And if we don't want it, we don't want it, but at least we don't want it based on really a lot of the information that hasn't been able to be shared with the public at large.
And that being said, I'll also chime in that, actually, it's sitting on my desk here. I got my Ohio ethics opinion back that said that I was okay to participate in any votes and discussions regarding the Hollywood Land project specifically. But like Councilor Vittori, I think, and Councilor Moon has chimed in as well about it, you know, I don't think that the citizens necessarily have had a good enough opportunity to learn about the intricacies of the proposed project, and I've asked before for town halls, but I certainly think that this is a decision that has to be made with the support of the community, as well as the support of an incoming council. I think Mr. Palahniuk touched on sort of why a project can have success or why it may find failure, and a lot of that is the continuity of councils and you know, city staff and those sort of things. So I think that it's vitally important to this project and any project that we've got that kind of support in the community and on this council. So I support that suggestion, and certainly joining our new members in 2022, I would be interested to see how they would feel about that as well.
I definitely agree. I think obviously the continuity of council is critical, and having buy-in from the next council. I feel as though this project has been given its fair shake to date, and that's just my, you know, my feeling on it. But I have no problem if this council wants to wait for the next council to discuss it. I think that's completely valid.
Different topic. I didn't know, and I won't belabor the point, but I know the infrastructure bill was passed at the federal level, which deals more directly with some of these transportation, water, sewer, long-term control plan type things. Would just ask staff that as they kind of start coming together on what plans they might be applying for to the state, that keep council engaged, because I would really hope we can use those funds to really help mitigate some of these long-term control plan costs that are going to be coming down the pike. So look forward to seeing what the state's going to do. Will it go to the state, or will it be a direct distribution to the cities? Do we even know that yet?
We don't know that yet, but I just, for instance, today printed out is 116 pages or whatever that Senator Portman's office put out on everything they do know about the legislation since it's so new, kind of making some estimates as to what they expect Ohio would get, and simply yet not knowing exactly, does it become a grant applied for sort of thing, or does there some element of direct allocation? And I think in many cases we know it's going to be applied through the feds, and you know, the Brent Spence Bridge, for instance, I think everybody's planning for that and hoping, and that's going to be something. But then to the extent, is there more opportunity for just other communities to make application? We're going to watch really, really closely to see what that looks like, and we'll keep you apprised of it.
Thank you.
I have one new business item, if I can indulge council for a few minutes. We had a presentation from Mrs. Kaiser, the chair of the Holiday Hoopla Committee, and she made a compelling case for the project and how it has gained a lot of private support. I know the city has to date come to the table with some in-kind support for infrastructure to support the project, but I know there may be some funding gaps that the group is facing, and I didn't know if the council was willing to have staff investigate ways that we might creatively fill that gap. I don't know if it would be in the form of a forgivable loan, if certain goals were met over the course of the next year or 2, 3 years. But we talk about transformative projects, and this is one that seems to be right there near the goal line. And if we could help get it over the goal line and have something in place to capture audiences for downtown businesses and capitalize on the success of the Light Up Middletown and so many positives that could come out of it, if we could just, if council were willing to maybe come to the table with just a little bit more to make sure that project succeeded here in year one.
I was wondering about that as well. I don't know, and probably Ms. Cohen would be the one that could be able to answer this. I didn't know if we had any CARES Act fund left, or if this would be CDBG eligible, since probably most of the people participating would be moderate to low income, given, I don't know.
It would be impossible to do it because you have to be able to directly understand who the patrons utilizing it are. And you wouldn't be, you'd literally have people like everybody that comes down, what's your income? It's like, it doesn't work very well trying to do that, but.
If we were to provide, I guess one of my questions, and I wish I would have thought of it in, last meeting, is if they're off on budgeting, I'd like maybe scaling back the project might be a good approach. I think there's a lot of great things going on with it, and maybe if it was a little smaller the first year, it wouldn't hurt anyone, and that would probably be my first ask before we gave $100,000, which is nearly a third of the budget, which is I think what they're asking for. The other option would be if we were able to get some of the revenue from the ice rink to pay the city's portion back. That would make me feel better about such an investment. I have a hard time giving $100,000 for a project that then we have to still charge our citizens to use as like an ice rink. And I don't like that part of that, and I don't feel like $100,000 worth is going to come back into enough different businesses that we can justify an economic impact citywide on it. Then again, I love the project, and I think it's going to be great for Middletown. I just hesitate to spend that much money without having budgeted and planned it out. And I'd like to see maybe it scaled back a little this time just to prove its effectiveness.
Well, in further discussions with Mrs. Carr, I think initially, there were some unforeseen obstacles, but it's close to probably a $500,000 project once it's all said and done. So we wouldn't be providing a third, and if the number's not 100, I don't know if there's some number that would be.
I thought she said her initial investment was 300 to 350, and that's where I was getting that percentage from. So again, maybe I don't know enough details about it.
I think there's been some additional required investments beyond that.
Yeah, and that's where I think scaling it back is, that's a big pot of money.
I guess I don't have any great answers. My comment to staff would be, I hope you engage and talk with Mrs. Kaiser about how I want to be supportive. I would like to help. I'm not disagreeing with my colleagues on their concerns, but I would like to see it happen. And if we can have productive conversations about how we make it happen and are fiscally responsible for the city, then I would like to see that happen.
And if I can, I think it should be noted that the city has already committed quite a substantial amount, both of in-kind and actual cash expenditures for this. So we're picking up the cost of the electric, we're picking up the cost of the water. I think we've found a way to pay for additional security. Chriselle, how much was that? 20,000. The electric is 22,000, I think. The water is a couple of hundred. We're looking at the potential of possibly funding an additional transformer that they need. And we would do that because the site will need a new transformer for redevelopment in the future, but that could be as much as, $20-some thousand. So, we're on the hook for about $45,000 right now. It could become as high as $67,000. That's a pretty substantial contribution. We have to compare that to many of the legacy events that have happened in the community. I don't have that much background with them, but I know that, they've spent a lot of money, a lot of time, and I don't think the city really was contributing to those, whether that's Light Up Middletown or the the Bash or some of these other projects. They've gotten through fundraising. So if we suddenly begin a process of, we're going to fund a lot in actual dollars for this project, then I think you have to have a plan and a policy that says, well, how are we going to treat some of these others as well? So.
And I will say that we are going to extend the Wi-Fi to the ice skating rink, and we're going to have a landing page that's going to promote all of the winter and Middletown events, Light Up Middletown, Portopia, and the ice skating, and then there's going to be a link for discounts. So if any business in Middletown, no matter where you're located, has the opportunity to list a discount on there too. So we're really trying to promote all of our small businesses and help them with marketing, not just for the hoopla, but for all the different events as well too.
And I'll just restate that because I'm sure people aren't going to be able to have heard it. But if you're a business in Middletown and you have a discount you'd like to promote during the holiday season specifically, is that right? Reach out to business@cityofmiddletown.org, and they would be happy to put it on a website for you.
I just had a thought, and this goes to Councilman Moon, your question. It would be rather difficult to make just a direct contribution of CDBG, but I thought of something that could potentially work, and that is the skate rental, which they'll be doing. If, for instance, we funded the payment of passes for disadvantaged kids who could then go get those skates without paying for them, and we paid the vendor for every pass turned in, then we know that it was a disadvantaged kid that took advantage of it, so the income requirements would be met, and you'd kind of do what you're supposed to do with the CDBG, which is provide for low to moderate income people. So maybe that's an opportunity, maybe something like that. So
That's a good idea. Yeah, is there consensus on council then to have staff investigate further?
I think all of this is really wonderful. Out of an abundance of caution, I'm not sure what the exact proximity of my business is to this. I know it's pretty close. So that being said, I'm not going to engage in the conversation, but I appreciate all of the positive input.
Yeah, and ditto for me, because it's literally touching our property, so I will also refrain from comment.
Yeah, I talked to Ben a little bit about it, and I think that the proximity, if there wasn't a physical location, if it was just a downtown event and generally serving downtown, it would be different because there's a physical space that's in proximity. So,
Can you, the 20,000 in security, is that through Allied, or how is that?
I think we were paying for additional off-duty police officers, yeah.
On-site security.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's obviously a disconnect with DMI on that one. They just asked us.
Yeah, it was not an extension of the DMI. It was with the off-duty police officer.
Okay, gotcha.
And additional security through Allied, so it's split.
Oh, was it both? Okay, my mistake.
Okay.
But it was addition to what you were doing, or was it? Yeah, it's not replace, it was addition.
Added hours.
Something along the lines of if we're helping disadvantaged children to go ice skating, okay, yes, like yes, if there's a proposal that comes like that, I think that's a great one. But based on what you're saying was already been put in by the city, I wouldn't want to provide dollars in a lump sum, because obviously you guys have done a lot and supported it a lot, and I'm grateful for that, and I know our citizens are too. That being said, though, if we were to do something and there's only 3 members to vote, we couldn't do it as emergency. So how much use, maybe we could commit to reimbursing them for something like that, and it would have to be done 30 days after. So it would be, the end of January. But I just thought I'd throw that out there. We couldn't do an emergency legislation at the next meeting, so for what that's worth. I just had a couple really quick things that came to mind, just thinking about grants and things. The 1338 Central, I know we gave them a small business grant. We approved it in November of 2020. Do we have an update on whether all those violations had been fixed yet? And I just drive by it a lot, and I don't see a lot going on, and I was wondering if they had met all the terms and conditions of that one. You don't have to answer right now, but if it's, yep. Yeah, 1338 Central. And then we talked about getting some stats about engagement with One City from Allied. Is it possible to get an update on kind of all of the One City engagements and what's been going on with that?
Yes, because I know Chief Burke has all that data and statistics, and I'm sure he'll be able to do that. So, yeah.
And then one thing that just came to mind in the meeting, but possibly another kind of incentive we could work into things for employees at some point is a bonus paid leave. I know that's something that was done in the federal government. Maybe it's something the city could look into as well, as an alternative to, a lump sum or whatever it might be if we ever had considered it. But just throwing it out there for future consumption. Any other new business?
Can I just mention something really quick? Tomorrow is the groundbreaking for MAID. It's at 10 o'clock on MAID, at MAID Park. So you all are invited.
Groundbreaking for Made tomorrow, 10 a.m. All right, so with that, we will adjourn until December 7th at 5:30 p.m. here in council chambers, and it will be followed by the State of the City address. And until then, blue skies over Middletown.